Okay, I believe we're live. Going to share our presentation. For our online audience and anyone here who would like to check, I believe that our presentation should now be showing the same thing as showing here in Forum C of the Burge Union. If the audio is bad, please let me know on Teams or at rsf@ku.edu. For those who are online, the only things we've covered so far are our very title slide here, and then what the RSF committee is. For the sake of time, as I only have 55 minutes remaining, I'm not going to go back over that. So, what is the RSF Review Committee? We are unique that our large student fee, $24 million annually, is allocated by a committee composed of entirely students. There are 12 voting members, and the chair votes in case of a tie. There's also 3 ex officio and 2 non-voting members. The only difference is that ex officio members can make motions, non-voting members cannot, but they still have speaking rights. This year, the committee convened for 15 plus hours of hearings and 5 plus hours of deliberations. Hold on for one more second. And 9 plus hours of deliberations. All hearings and deliberations are also recorded and available online, which is something I'm very, very happy to say was the case for this year. As the chair, my role is to book all of our meetings, communicate with all fee managers regarding their proposal and presentation, ensure we complete our proposal in a timely manner, ensure deliberations follow proper procedure, and handle all communication on behalf of and within the RSF committee. I can only vote to either make or break ties. That might sound confusing. All that means is if the margin is close enough, I can vote to either pass or fail whatever motion is before us. Given my role, I've done my best to stay impartial throughout this process and ensure any and all rulings are based solely on our Student Senate Constitution and Robert's Rules of Order. I will discuss this a bit more going forwards too. So I wanted to spend a second, hopefully not too long, talking about this year's deliberations in particular. Some of you might be far too familiar with this view here, but this is a screenshot of the Fee Review Committee meeting live stream, our first round of deliberations. I am incredibly happy to say that we were able to live stream everything. This is a huge step in the right direction for transparency, and I sincerely thank everybody who sat through even part of our 9-hour deliberations. I also really want to apologize for any issues with the audio and visual quality. We did the best we could with the resources provided to us and the support capabilities of KUIT and union staff. So thank you for everyone who has helped out there. Now, some of you are familiar with the screenshot for different reasons, and I promise we're going to get into those. There's 4 things I really wanted to make clear before we get into any discussion of any particular fees. First, any communications that were not directly from me or advisors or the rsf@ku.edu email were not official and do not represent the RSF committee in any way, shape, or form. This is something committee members were reminded of on numerous occasions, and any actions undertaken by committee members without my express involvement were done so in their own personal capacity. This is actually explicitly mentioned in our Constitution under Title V, Article 2, Section 3. Another thing I'd like to clarify. I was not personally involved in or aware of any group chats or other communications that occurred during deliberations. To be clear, I am in a group chat with all of our legislative leaders and chairs, and we all work together to label the free response data from our fee survey, which I'm going to talk about with you all soon. No messages were sent in that group chat that I'm a part of during deliberations, and I'm not personally aware of any other chats where discussion may have taken place during deliberations. I'm obviously not included in them in my role as the chair of the RSF committee. Second, our hearings and the following deliberations followed the guidelines laid out by both our Student Senate Constitution and Robert's Rules of Order. No concerns warranting a ruling from me as the chair were brought to my attention before or after deliberations, and all concerns raised during the meeting were dealt with according to Robert's Rules. A concern was raised during the break in deliberations that speakers were not being granted the full attention of our committee, and actions were taken to ensure no side discussions or distracting conversations took place. Committee members were also reminded multiple times to keep comments germane to our hearings and the information available to all committee members. Discussion violating these rules was stricken from the record. Another thing that I think is important to share here, some form of preparation before deliberations is expected, if not encouraged, every year. Frankly, a fee package does not happen without that kind of preparation. People need to come in reviewing all of the proper information. They can speak with other committee members and ask questions beforehand. But I will say, if that preparation in any way interferes with the thorough discussion and individualized consideration that's required of committee members during deliberation, that unfortunately demonstrates a lack of respect for other committee members, our fee managers, and all students who pay student fees. Third, I am disappointed with several aspects of this year's fee review process. For the record, had the margin been close enough, I would, and if it had been close enough to allow the chair to intervene, I would have voted no and forced the committee to reconvene on a Saturday. I feel that we could have benefited from additional discussion on the fee package for a few reasons. I think what seemed to be our most drastic cuts, and that's purely in terms of percentage of existing funding, I think that they came towards the end of our deliberations without any motions to re-examine any fees. Part of this was intentional. Again, I communicated at the beginning of the meeting it'd be best to start with our easier requests of flat funding. But I believe as the room grew weary and the night grew long, I worry we could have had more robust discussion given different circumstances. Also, throughout deliberations, several points were raised that regarded information obtained outside of hearings, but they still held bearing on the discussion at hand. They were not ruled non-germane. Given more time and clear communication, I believe that progress could have been made here to ensure that all committee members and all involved actors were on the same page, and I don't believe we were this year. Another point, many of the cuts this year felt punitive. Although these decreases followed the guidelines laid out in Title V, Article 2, Section 9, Part D of our Constitution, some issues were resolved through budget cuts rather than appropriate conversations or resolutions. Again, these conversations are important, and I think that more time should have been dedicated towards them. Lastly, several committee members had to leave before deliberations adjourned, but we did have at least 11 of our 12 voting members accounted for throughout the entire deliberations. That does constitute a quorum, to be clear. But one voting member, along with several ex officio and non-voting members, chose to leave partway through for various reasons. Finally, and here is the fourth point, if you were counting, I want to remind you all that all of our committee members are students. This is something unique about KU's fee review body, especially given the large amount of money that we allocate. Many of us spent the past month balancing school, research, part-time jobs, 20 plus hours of hearing and deliberations, and who knows how much work outside of that. None of us are paid for filling this role on the fee review committee, except for those who receive compensation for their other positions on Senate, as outlined in Article 3 of our Constitution. We're all volunteering our time to represent student interests and voices to the best of our ability. The affordability of college was a pervasive concern throughout the process, and I'm happy to report the potential for an overall decrease in student fees for the first time since fiscal year 23. Regardless of the result of our deliberations and this meeting tonight, I'm incredibly grateful and proud of this year's committee for their hard work, and I'm going to faithfully carry out my responsibilities that I was elected to perform as the chair of the Finance Council and RSF Committee. I sincerely hope that each of you here today will listen carefully to the reasoning and speeches presented with respect and understanding in order to form your own personal views on our fee package. With that being said, I have something else we're going to discuss really quick. I'm not going to spend too long on this because we all have access to it, and honestly, it did not play a huge role in our deliberations this year. You can watch our deliberations, see how it was discussed, but this here is our fee survey. I recommend downloading it as an HTML file. It doesn't work super well on SharePoint or mobile. I'm also going to show it on the screen here if I can get it pulled up quickly. A quick disclaimer, the results are also not ideal for a variety of reasons that I'm going to describe. We're going to continue work on a more formal and finalized report, but that's going to take us some time. I would actually love to provide you all with underlying data in the meantime, but we did not have the resources to sort through each response in order to sufficiently protect student privacy in the time that we had. I recommend pursuing the Kansas Open Records Act process through KU General Counsel if you would like access to the underlying data. But I can share with you all the summarized data that I shared with RSF Committee. And thankfully that is loading up perfectly. Okay, I really cannot read that, so bear with me if I say anything that's not on the report. I'm going to try to do this kind of quickly. Biggest thing, there have been 2,000, I know it's so small. Pull
Can you see with the three dots in the top left corner?
it up on your own side. I think this can full screen, huh? Yeah, sorry. This does not pull up well here. I can't get it pulled up better. I'm so sorry. Download it on your own device, view it in a browser. That's the best way. It's an HTML file. Cool. Okay. Biggest thing here. We had an astounding 2,627 responses to our fee review survey. That's probably the most we've ever had. It's more than double what we had last year. This is insane the amount of engagement we've had this year, and I have so many people to thank for it. Our staff here and members of our legislative branch and student senate who helped with the data, who helped with PR, everybody who hung up posters, everybody who shared it with a friend, everybody who filled it out, obviously. So again, thank you so much. It does not go unnoticed, and we really appreciate your feedback here. There are some of the past years of feedback if you were curious. I'm going to go question by question here. There are just bar charts representing all of these, and I will note any caveats to any of the questions. First, which campus have you attended classes? This one's short and sweet. Lawrence, Edwards, both. Clearly a lot of students who filled out the survey are from the Lawrence campus. There is a glaring omission here. Online students were not included. Students who are purely enrolled in online courses were directed to choose the Lawrence campus options. One thing to be clear, the fee schedule for KU is actually surprisingly complex. It all depends on kind of what status of student you are, how many credit hours you're in, where you're enrolled in classes, less so than in previous years, but still. All of this determines what fees you pay. The survey was, a list of students who pays fees was brought by the registrar in the hopes of only sending the email out to people who actually pay the fee. That's not entirely the case, but in theory, if you fill out the form, you pay the fee, you'll see it posted on Enroll and Pay. We're going to work on this in future years to make sure that all the different demographics for this question are covered, but here are our results. It's going to look pretty similar no matter what other options are out there. Next up is question 2. Are you familiar with Student Senate? Most are somewhat, then no, and then yes. This kind of falls in line with what we see from the student body generally, and it's great that we're able to get this data from so many more people than we've had in the past. Then, are you familiar with the RSF process? Clearly, less students are familiar with the RSF process, which makes sense. It is definitely has a big impact on campus, but it's not as publicized or well known as Student Senate more broadly. Next, which of the following services matter most to you? Here you see that we have collected data for campus activities, fitness, healthcare, legal, mental health, other, safety, student wages, sustainability, and transportation. Now, these are not tied. We didn't list the names for specific student services. This question is a little bit broader in how we formed it. We wanted to discuss just generally what areas are most important. Students could select up to 3, which is why you see many more responses here than the 2,627. And also free response text was collected for the other response. That will be analyzed at a future date. Question 5, which of the following campus resources have you used in the last year? This one, students could select all that apply. One issue here, students who had not used any of these services did not have an option to select none of them. But you will see here that we have most students using things like the Ambler Recreation Center, KU buses, KU unions, walk-ins, and then a smaller amount of students using Burt Nash, Hilltop, LSS, things like that. One thing I want to clarify and make clear here, just because a service is not used broadly and widely by all students does not mean that we should not be paying for it or it doesn't benefit students. LSS is a great example here. The financial impact they have on students, and I'm going to repeat this when we get to the LSS slide too, the financial impact they have on students is immense, and when you need them, even though a small amount of students use them, when you need them, you really need them. So that's an example of, even though it's small on this bar chart here, they still have a big impact on students. Question 6, which of the following best describes your student fee preference? I don't have last year's results up here, but this was actually shockingly similar to the proportions, not the actual amounts, but the proportions of the whole to last year's responses. It seems that we are getting a representative sample of students here, which is great, and those preferences have not changed too much. Genuinely, the only difference, reduce fell by like 5 or 6%, and then people with no opinion rose by like 5% this year. That's about the only difference between this year and last year. But you'll see overwhelmingly students want to reduce fees, then keep them at their current level, and then increase. A caveat that's been added here in previous years that's actually not listed here. On the form itself, there's a bit of a clarifying aspect to it, saying that be aware reducing fees or keeping them steady could reduce student services, something along those lines. And that is just to be clear because inflation's a pervasive threat each year that rises the cost of services for the entities to provide. So that means that the fee's gonna have to increase eventually over the years just to keep levels of service the same. Next, and unfortunately this question is the one with the most issues with the way it's currently presented. Any additional thoughts and feedback was kind of what this was asked at the end here, but I think this is the most interesting one. This has never been a required question before to my knowledge, but this year on the forum we made it required. We will probably not do that in the future because we spent, as you can see, there were only 1,164 responses. The rest of them were different variations of no, nothing, NA, not applicable, a million different ways you can spell that. So we'll think a bit more careful about how we're going to deal with this survey response in the future. But you will see they were broadly sorted into these different categories. A lot of it was done automatically through some different filters and coding through Excel and using R. The rest, like around 750 responses, were sorted manually by people listed at the top of this document. Simra, if you see this, I'm very sorry I didn't fix your name on the slide version. It is fixed in a newer version of this document. This is just for the public. But yeah, thank you to everybody who helped me sort this data. These are the responses, so you'll see here. Oh yeah, one other big caveat here. These are not coded by positive or negative. So for example, an overwhelming amount of the people who mentioned student fees want them to be reduced, and then an overwhelming amount of people who meant to say Friday want it back. In the future, when we get more finalized results, we're going to try to code that and make it a bit clearer what the information provided by students here is. Okay, that is all I have for our fee survey results. Please feel free to ask me any questions on it at the end. Great. So, moving back to our presentation, I wanted to spend a bit of time really quickly going over a timeline and tonight's proceedings. Forgive me if I'm talking fast. Raise your hand if you don't understand me or anything going on in the presentation. We have a lot to get through still. We had our hearings, had our deliberations. This is our presentation to the Finance Council tonight. Next week, we present to the Student Assembly. It's also going to require a 2/3 vote to pass. Then it needs to be approved by university leadership before the presentation to the Kansas Board of Regents, which I believe is on May 20th. People can correct me if that's incorrect or correct. I did that based off of their public meeting calendar on their website. Everything will be pushed back 2 weeks if the fee package fails tonight or next week. And something very, very important for y'all to understand, Finance Council cannot amend the package. It can only remand it with recommendations, which we should leave an hour for at the end of this meeting. I know many of you are going to have things to say here tonight, but please remember to leave time and space for others, as any recommendations we do not get to before adjourning tonight will not be discussed by the RSF committee. We will only discuss the specific written out recommendations we provide to the committee. Another reminder, taking questions at the end of your speech is optional. I will be doing my best to answer every question I get. Also, a reminder for our voting and ex officio members, you can call the previous question at any time to close debate. If you think we're ready to vote on the package, that will require 2/3 vote affirmation. You can also motion to extend time to ask more questions of the speaker, but please be mindful of other people who may wish to speak and try to avoid giving more time for one side over another. Okay, here is the total fee this year. This year, students pay a $532.50 fee, and we received $545.65 of asks total across all fee-funded organizations. Each year, the RSF committee receives guidance from the Kansas Board of Regents and KU administration regarding a maximum fee increase. Typically, a 2% fee increase each year is expected in order to keep up with inflation. Still, our fee constantly lags behind inflation as we strive to keep college affordable for students. This year, there's been discussion of a statewide tuition and fee freeze, meaning we've received guidance to keep our fiscal year 27 fees flat at a maximum. To be clear, this guidance was not provided before our first round of deliberations, but this is the most up-to-date information that I have access to, that our maximum for fees and the guidance we provided there is $532.50, our fiscal year 26 allocation. So our proposal for fiscal year 27, which I will soon describe step by step, comes to a total of $530.30. This is a $2.20 reduction when compared to current fees. For the rest of the presentation, we're going to discuss the asks, allocations, and reasoning behind our choices for all 20+ fee entities. First, here's the Student Center activity fee. I'm going to give a little intro on how to read these slides because I tried to format them all similarly. So first I have their ask. It's very, very important to understand the asks here are what was shown on that big table all the way back here that was live streamed. These were not the only asks, actually. An organization and a fee entity, they provide a scenario A and a scenario B. Typically, those scenarios will be something like, here's a request for an increase, and then here's what it would look like if it were flat. Sometimes they'll have two scenarios for like, we want a big increase or then maybe a small increase. They can choose to present that however they want. But the ask listed here was typically just the smaller one. So sometimes if you see us providing a bigger increase than their ask, that's usually the reason why. But I'm going to explain each of those if that case comes up. This is actually an example. There were two scenarios, a 1650 fee and a 1550 fee. You'll see in the allocations that for fiscal year 27, we went with the $15.50 fee. That's opposed to the $20 fee that the Student Senate activity fee got in fiscal year 26. Then I'm going to describe some of the reasoning and then resolutions attached to the package. And then you'll see the overall change from fiscal year 26 to 27 in that box in the corner. So another thing that's important regarding, actually I'll get to this. Let's start with the reasoning. So block, line, and Wednesday night fund, I'll explain this really quickly. These are the three primary funds of Student Senate that were shown in that graph earlier. Block is for established organizations on Student Senate, at least university that have been funded for at least 3 years. These are things like the Lead Center, KU bands, forensics, stuff like that. You'll see there, this at the top there. Then there's line item fund, which is student clubs, things like that. And Wednesday night fund is our remaining unallocated money that we allocate here every night. You'll notice also that we used to have a deficit recovery fee that is going to zero now. That was because the student activity fee was actively in a deficit last year. So we needed to pay that off, and we have paid it off, as you can see here. So what is our reasoning? Given the revenue collected towards the Student Senate activity fee and the expected revenue for fiscal year 27, we no longer have to allocate funds towards deficit recovery, as I mentioned. As long as we follow the budget outlined by our treasurer, which is shown here, it's not going to be concerned any longer. You're also going to notice that funds allocated to Wednesday night fund and block have decreased, while line has increased. It was a goal from our treasurer and committee to shift funds away from Wednesday night fund and towards line item allocations. We spend a lot of time here on Wednesday nights debating the minutia, pizza, plates, etc. We believe our time could be better spent if more of these allocations are made through the line item fund. Of course, it's going to present more of a burden on clubs to apply for funding in advance, so we're going to strengthen our outreach efforts to compensate. Block funding also decreased by around the size of student support and case management's fiscal year 26 block allocation because they presented and applied for funding from the student fee this year, which we will get to. Moving on to resolutions. As always for Student Senate, resolutions are non-binding. The fee review committee provides an allocation and a recommendation for how funds should be spent, but we cannot mandate that funds are spent in any particular way. This is because each fee entity has a fee manager who serves as a trustee for their fee. They each know best where and how to spend their money. It's their choice at the end of the day. We can just provide recommendations for them. For our constitution, the treasurer is our trustee. So meaning that, like any other resolutions, they and their respective committee have final discretion over what funds are allocated in what manner. Here's our resolution for this year. Our resolution was passed from our second deliberations to allocate 64% increase from line item funding to block funding. The reasoning behind that will become clear going forwards. And to be clear, that resolution did pass, so it'll be at the discretion of our treasurer. Next, the Community Development Fund. They provide dedicated support for organization and events that promote community engagement and intercultural education. They had a 25-cent decrease as their ask this year, and that's what they received. The fund has seen significantly less activity than previous years, likely from a lack of student organization awareness and the rebrand. There's currently more than 30,000 unallocated out of 46,000 in revenue as of our deliberations, so the 25-cent decrease would reduce revenue by around 10K. Next, the Educational Opportunity Fund provides funds for scholarships, grants, public service salaries, and student service salaries. It's allocated by Student Senate through the EOF board. They asked for a flat fee and were granted a flat fee in order to continue to be able to provide these funds. I'll be right back when I grab a little water. Sorry about that, y'all. We will now move forward with Watkins Health Services. Watkins is the health center for KU students next to Cap Fed and the Ambler Rec. Their fee covers office visits with a medical provider, which are provided at no cost and with no copay. It also allows for reduced fees for services such as labs, x-rays, and pharmacy items. This fee also supports the Health Education Resource Office, or HERO, and this is particularly important whenever we're getting to this time of the year and everybody seems to be down with the flu, which is why I imagine a lot of members aren't here tonight. For their ask, they actually had two scenarios. This is important to be clear with. They asked for either a $4 or a $2 increase. They were granted their larger ask of $4. They have not requested an increase over the last 4 years, and without this full increase, they would either have to increase their prices or reduce services. So the fee review committee decided to grant their full ask. Next, KU Counseling and Psychological Services, or CAPS, was created in 1991 and provides mental health services and resources to students. They also provide consults, workshops, urgent appointments, psychiatry, and after-hours help through their app. You may be most familiar with their mental health peer educators, who are 11 students trained to help other students manage daily stressors. Their new community space right next to Alderson Auditorium has also proven to be a hit this year. This year they had two asks, $3 and $4.30. The $3 would allow them to continue to account for ongoing expenses and avoid reducing services or staffing, while the $4.30 increase would allow them to improve services. The committee landed in between with a $4 increase, which will support CAPS in expanding their embedded clinician program and hold additional small groups and workshops. Next, the Hilltop Child Development Center provides childcare and education for children of KU students, faculty, staff, and the broader Lawrence community. Hilltop has grown from 3 classrooms of 50 children to 2 licensed sites with a capacity of 450. Student fees account for around 3% of Hilltop's annual revenue, and this allows for Hilltop to offset costs associated with KU student employee salaries, tuition reduction for KU students, and maintenance. They requested a flat fee of $3.70, which would allow them to continue offering the reduced rates and expanded service expected for KU students. This year, committee members were primarily concerned with an investigation by the state into the Child Development Center. Although the center brought in new leadership and have improved training and licensing standards, the committee members still decided to cut this fee down to 0. Committee members cited the small portion of their overall budget we support and decreased enrollment in the Hilltop Child Development Center. So on this next slide, I combined several building and maintenance fees. These fees are typically held flat or they face small changes over a large time span. This year, all of these fees were granted their flat ask. A lot of these actually can't be changed because they are financing paid by Student Senate, so this is literally a bond that we're providing payments for. I did want to provide some more background on the Burge Union fee. It was established to fund the construction of the Burge Union per the Memorandum of Understanding between the University of Kansas Memorial Corporation and the University of Kansas Student Senate. This MOU was signed on November 4th, 2015, and it designated the $18.40 fee to fund the construction of the Burge Union through fiscal year 48. I believe it says $18.70 in the MOU. I think the number changed purely because of the combination between the Lawrence and Edwards campuses, which reduced fees as more students were paying into it. Concerns were raised during deliberations that the Kansas Memorial Corporation was in violation of several aspects of the Memorandum of Understanding, so a resolution was passed to initiate a review and to renegotiating this memorandum as it reads there. But the fee was kept flat as, again, it's financing supported by Student Senate. This leads us to the Student Union Building Fee, which is also paid to the Kansas Memorial Corporation. This corporation is a 501c3 nonprofit affiliate of KU that operates the Kansas Union, Burge Union, and DeBruce Center. It also includes campus dining and bookstore operations across 26 different locations on campus, but the student fee doesn't affect, we don't pay into that as students. Student fees provide around 7% of the union's revenue, and they requested a flat fee of $71.90 this year. Student fees support primarily student-facing aspects of the union, such as student union activities, SUA, or the KJHK radio, and it also funds both an operations and renovation fund for the Kansas Union. They've received $71.90 for the past 2 fiscal years after an increase from $63.40 in fiscal year 24. A big reason for that increase was the rolling in of KJHK and SUA under the student union fee. They used to be their own separate fee lines. I believe fiscal year 24 was the year it was rolled into this bigger student union building fee. So to be clear, the trustees for the student union building fee, they're the ones who allocated the funds to KJHK and SUA. Discussion centered on a low number of student room reservations and lack of prioritization. The previously mentioned Memorandum of Understanding and the small proportion of their total revenue that students fund through student fees. It is highly likely that this cut will affect student services, whether that comes out of KJHK, the SUA, or future maintenance issues. It definitely means no further renovations will be planned at this current fee. 2 applicable resolutions were passed here. The first requests that the University of Kansas Memorial Corporation allocates $3.93 to fully fund KJHK in recognition of their continued excellence in student public broadcasting. And the second concerns a group not currently part of the union and a group that's going to be our next topic of discussion. A second resolution was passed here to have the union explore the feasibility of absorbing the University of Daly Kansan under its operational structure consistent with the model previously implemented for KJHK. To be clear, $8.50 decrease here to a new fee of $63.40. Let's move on to the University of Daly Kansan, or the UDK. The Kansan provides independent journalism about KU and the Lawrence community. They inform and engage students and play a big part in traditions like print, newspaper, and basketball games. This year, they requested a $1.50 increase. Last year, the UDK received a cut down to $1.50 from a fee of $3.64 in fiscal year 25, which is not listed up there. So you can look at last year's fee presentation if you want the year going back. But yeah, $3.64 in fiscal year 25. In order to preserve student wages, the UDK chose to draw down on their reserves to deal with that cut in fiscal year 26. So last year, the cut down to $1.50. But that was only sustainable for this year. Their budget covers around 15 paid student staff, and they have many more students who work for them who are not paid. This year, the required student fee review committee decided to cut the UDK readership fee to 0. Discussion was focused on finding the best home for the UDK, as concerns were raised regarding continued support for them through the student fee. Committee members believe that the UDK, with its smaller overhead costs and independent nature, would be better served through other funding sources such as Block. The UDK has applied for Block funding, and the committee passed a resolution to its effect. You can see that as its first one, the first resolution up there. A resolution was also passed to mirror the one for the Kansas Memorial Corporation, requesting that the UDK remain open to good faith discussions with the Kansas Union concerning the potential integration of services, resources, or administrative functions. And to be clear here, the trustees, they decide where the money goes at the end of the day, and this is their discussion to have. The UDK could still receive funding from other sources, and there's a lot more discussion to be had about what this would look like. This is not a unilateral decision by the RSF committee in any way, shape, or form. Next, let's talk about recreation. I'm sure you all know about or have visited the Ambler Recreation Center. It's been funded by student fees since it opened in 2003 and was expanded with a $6.3 million, 45,000 square foot addition in 2008. This year, the bond which paid for that addition is sunsetting, meaning students no longer have to pay $11.55 each semester to pay off that debt. This has been a big year pointed to every single year for the Recreation Center, and that leads us to the other rec fees. So I combined two fees here. These were initially separate on the big table, and I think they're separate on the bill. I combined them for the sake of time. While the expansion bond is sunsetting, the rec still has two other fees. They were granted their full $6 ask for both operations and maintenance, bringing them to a total of $67.80. Compared to the Big 12, we are near the bottom in terms of fees dedicated to our recreation center, and we are at the bottom in terms of indoor square footage. This increase will allow them to proceed as planned with a small renovation, expand student-facing programs, replace old equipment, and work towards addressing the $9.7 million of expected maintenance in the coming decades. They will still likely need increases in the future to close this gap, so an increase now could help offset any future asks. Next, the Edwards campus, which if you don't know, smaller campus focused on the Kansas City economy and more professional students, typically more graduate programs over in Overland Park, Kansas. The Edwards campus was granted their flat ask of $11. To better align the campus fee structure between the Lawrence and Edwards campuses, the required campus fee was changed to the required student fee, and the fee structure for the Lawrence and Edwards campuses were aligned starting with fiscal year 25. This led to slight changes in all fee amounts as the pool of students expanded and the addition of this $11 fee. Keeping this fee flat will allow for the Edwards campus to continue to staff student employees at their Welcome and Success Center, support student clubs and campus events, and work to align services across campuses. Next, the Sexual Assault Prevention and Education Center, or SAPEC, promotes social change and the elimination of sexual violence through prevention education, inclusive programming, and campus-wide collaboration. Here is one of their great stickers, which I love to see that is included on pretty much every year's student fee presentation. And this is an example of the kind of educational materials they put out. They were granted their full ask of 75 cents. That's going to support one paid graduate assistant position, one paid MSW macro practicum position, and 4 paid undergrad positions. One thing I'd like to emphasize, SAPAC has shown impeccable stewardship over student fees. They diversify revenue sources through grant applications and endowment, meaning that we are only 22% of their total funding. In fact, they're one of the only student fees that have asked for a decrease in fees when they feel like they have enough. This new increase will sustain them until at least fiscal year 29. Next is the campus transportation fee. This fee provides for the on-campus and off-campus KU bus routes, along with several routes coordinated with Lawrence Transit. They asked for and were granted a flat operations fee, and staff will review service levels across all routes to identify where additional hours can be added to improve frequency. Another thing, this is similar to the rec slide, I combined two fees that are separate on the bill, the operations and the procurement fees. Bus procurement increased by a total of $2.50. This is opposed to their minimal ask of $1. I think this was another scenario, this was another scenario where there were separate asks for the fee here. $1 would allow them to continue with their current bus procurement schedule that funds 2 buses per year and 3 buses every third year. This is because the cost of buses increases 5% each year, so it's going to allow them to continue to follow that pattern. They did have another scenario we considered for procurement that was $4. This would allow them to begin purchasing and replacing vehicles for Safe Ride, which currently includes 8-year-old Pacificas that have had 3 major recalls. The $4 increase is not required to restore the Safe Ride service. The committee landed on an intermediate increase of $2.50 as a result. Next is the Safe Ride fee. Similarly, they had 2 scenarios, a $7.30 increase shown above and a $12.55 increase. The purpose of this program is to provide students with safe transportation home in the evening with no questions asked. Due to decreases last year, the program was not able to operate throughout the school year, except for the Safe Bus service operating until 1 a.m. on Monday through Thursday. A $7.30 increase would be enough to start Safe Ride back up at 70% of its previous capacity, and the Transit Commission would decide how the service hours would be allocated. The other scenario, which our fee review committee decided to pursue, was a $12.55 increase to restore 100% of service. This total fee is larger than it was before, and that is purely because their carry forward allowed them to support a lower fee, but we now face their full operating expenditures if we want to restore 100% of service. Next is Legal Services for Students, or LSS. They provide confidential professional legal advice and assistance to students. They operate with no additional fees for their services and refer out for any cases outside the scope of their practice between their three attorneys, admin staff, and 1 to 10 student interns. It was established by Student Senate in 1979 and has been fighting for student rights for 47 years. Although a smaller group of students are supported per fee dollar here, as I mentioned when we were discussing the survey, the students that need these services really need them. In 2025, LSS provided over $2.8 million in financial benefits and savings to students. That's far greater than the around 900,000 students paying into this fee. And I'm calculating that by taking the flat fee up there, multiplying it by our fee multiplier, and start this presentation. In 2025, LSS provided, I already said that, for these reasons, the RSF committee chose to keep the fee flat this year. Next is the Student Engagement Center. They were granted another flat ask. Last year, for some context, the Center for Sexuality and Gender Diversity, the Emily Taylor Center for Women and Gender Equity, the Office of Multicultural Affairs, and the Student Involvement and Leadership Center were combined into one big center called the Student Engagement Center that's housed in Sabatini Multicultural Resource Center, right next to the Union. There's a picture right there. The Student Engagement Center asked for and was granted their flat ask of $13.25, which will allow them to continue to support the services provided by each of these centers, such as the campus cover, the pregnant and parenting pantry, and support for student leadership and clubs. A resolution was also passed to request that the Student Engagement Center take all reasonable measures to prevent reductions to student-facing services. During hearings, it is explained that as the center continues to adjust post-combination, any decreases in fees would see the most impact on student-facing services, such as the campus cover. Although no increase was requested this year, a resolution was still passed to help protect these vital student services. We are getting near the end here, only around 5 slides left. So this next fee is tied to what I shared about the Student Engagement Center. The Student Program Funding Administration funds the Assistant Director for Student Senate Leadership, along with the Student Senate Program Coordinator, both of whom are in the back today. Previously, $2.05 was designated for the Student Senate administrative support out of the former Silk fee, which was combined into the SEC. But it was separated out and these positions were brought under student affairs after the Senate combination. The $1 increase was required to fully fund the salaries and fringe for these positions. Not having their full support for Student Senate was actually part of the reason we ran a deficit last year. So anytime you hear the word fulfillment thrown around in the Senate, that involves one or both of these positions, which are incredibly vital to our continued operations. Next, the Campus Environmental Improvement Fee provides support for recycling across a variety of locations. KU diverts 18 tons a month from landfills through campus-wide recycling, reducing waste and promoting sustainable practices. This year, recycling requested a flat fee to support staffing, equipment, and ensuring reliable recycling services. This year, the committee also decided to cut this fee down to $0. Discussion revolved around a perceived inability to increase service capacity, a desire for the university to fund recycling rather than students, and issues regarding ongoing service such as high contamination rates and a lack of service in buildings that are highly trafficked by students. Next, Jayhawk Finances. They provide coaching sessions, workshops, and information regarding financial wellness for students. They save students a lot of money by budgeting, saving, investment advice, along with tips for important payments like cars, homes, and insurance. If they received a cut, they would be forced to reduce staff, and the committee should keep them flat. We also have Student Support and Case Management, or SSCM. They provide non-clinical support to students while coaching them towards appropriate self-care and self-advocacy resources. They step in and serve as an intermediary to help students adjust to major stressors and changes in their lives to help them continue to succeed in college. SSCM has been supported by the Student Senate through block funding since at least fiscal year 22, probably longer than that too. They were given an opportunity to present for the first time to Fee Review Committee this year. They submitted a request for a $4 fee, which would cover salaries and an operational budget for a case manager and an administrative assistant position, along with a stipend for a student practicum position. Ultimately, the committee decided to not grant their $4 ask. They cited a desire for the university to pay for these services rather than students, and a lack of student input prior to receiving this fee proposal. Student Support and Case Management is still eligible to receive block funding as they have in the past. Last but not least, we have Community Supportive Services. This fee funds the Burt Nash Community Mental Health Center, Willow Domestic Violence Center, Headquarters Kansas, and the Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center, or the STA Care Center, to be clear here. So these all support individuals in crisis within the Lawrence and Douglas County community. While they do not only serve students, they do provide services for many members of the KU community, and other Kansas universities provide similar support through their student fees. Last year, funds were only provided to Burt Nash, as the remaining groups did not claim any student fees in fiscal year 24. So they were double paid in fiscal year 25 to compensate. Unfortunately, we were not able to hear from Headquarters Kansas this year, as they did not respond in time to schedule a hearing. Discussion within the committee focused on a perception of continued fiscal irresponsibility, a lack of transparency, low student impact, and miscommunication between the university and these outside services. The committee decided to continue providing funds to Burt Nash and grant Willow's ask for a 35-cent increase, which is around the level of funding they received in prior fiscal years. So to be clear, we did not provide funds for Headquarters or the STA Care Center. Okay, so I'm a little bit behind on time, but I think that leaves us around 12 minutes for questions. I'll take any and all questions. Thank you for listening.
There are about 12 minutes of questions. Any questions for the chair of the fee committee? Zach Lemke.
Could you
Rich, Mike.
Yeah.
Why did the student fee committee decide to take $2 and give it back to students when there are still campus organizations that were going without funding?
Question was asked about reallocations.
Yeah. So to be clear, as I mentioned, the understanding the Fee Review Committee had within our first deliberations was not $2. What we had, sorry, this doesn't fully cover it. We the first guidance we received was a 3% increase on top of the fiscal year 26 allocation. I don't know that number off the top of my head, I'm sorry. But now we've received guidance that it needs to be flat. So that $2.20 amount to give back to students, that was decided under the idea that we had 3% of wiggle room on top of the fiscal year 26 allocation. But now, like you mentioned, we are moving to provide $2.20 back to students with the reduction of this fee. I would say in broad strokes, the motivation is to reduce things that students are currently paying for that could potentially be paid for by other groups in and around campus, which may make more sense for them to do. Sorry, is that clear?
Sam Monty.
I would like to ask, for the things,
I don't think it's on, I'm sorry.
okay,
I just died.
for the things that are being, cut and suggested to be funded by the university, will the university pay those and how, like, what groups the university would be paying?
A question's been asked about the feasibility of the university paying for certain services.
I have not personally received any communication in my role as the chair of the RSF committee that anyone is willing to take up the cost of these fees outside of Student Senate and the resolutions that are passed regarding the Student Senate.
Ivana Dominic, I'll repeat your question after you ask this. There's no mic.
Can I ask if you're reading on the board?
If I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, at the beginning, you had mentioned that it didn't seem like the group had come to a general consensus regarding voting. Could you kind of elaborate on that? I can quote your exact words if that's better.
A question was asked about the opinions of the consensus of several B members.
So I wouldn't agree with the way you just phrased it, but I do think there was a lot of, it's okay. I do think there was a lot of disagreement within the room, which is good. We need to have debate, we need to have disagreement. I think that consensus-wise, you can see what consensus existed throughout the meeting with our votes. The voting record is public. I'm sorry that hasn't been publicized very well. The meeting minutes, we went over them all on our live stream. We're currently waiting on changes to those, and then once those changes are updated, I'll send it out for everybody because we had a few corrections to the minutes. But that voting record is public. If you're curious, you can look at that. You can ask anyone about why they voted in a certain way. I will say one additional thing here. I think we did have less consensus than we do in prior years. Our final fee package requires 2/3 approval to vote. Clearly, we had 9 votes in affirmation, 2 votes in negation. That's more than enough to pass a final fee package. Our intermediate votes, however, a lot of them were 6 in affirmation and 5 in negation. That is because of a ruling that was made during the meeting and then appealed partway through the meeting. Typically, our understanding is that we do 2/3 approval of each individual fee, but that standard was lowered as a decision I made as the chair was appealed by the committee. It had the votes it needed to do so, and that margin was lowered. For the intermediate questions, it was lowered to 50%, so more than half of vote members.
Any further questions to the presenter?
No, I was going to say, no way I did that good of a job.
Ivana Dominic.
Could you provide us with the rough estimate or percentage of how much student fees contribute to the environmental impact and sustainability?
Oh,
A question was asked about the environmental and sustainability fee.
I don't have the percent, but you could look at this. You could look at this and figure it out from there. It's in our budget book too. I'm so sorry. It's tiny. Look up Student Senate budget book, and then you'll find a much better, clearer table for fiscal year 26. You can also look at the bill for tonight, and you can calculate it that way. But yeah, you can see whatever percent of the whole the campus sustainability and environmental fee is of $532.50.
Sam Monty.
I would like to clarify on that question. Assuming that, where I was asking, how much of their funding is
Oh.
for these?
A follow-up concerning the sustainability fee was asked.
Sorry, I think I misunderstood the initial question. I do not know off the top of my head. I know we are not their only revenue source, but I imagine we're a very significant portion. This was not discussed in deliberations unless I'm forgetting.
It appears we now have a functioning mic. Are there any further questions? There are about 6 minutes remaining. I'm Seeing no further questions, Mason Weir,
I was just curious if you guys considered.
please approach the mic.
I was curious if the speaker.
Oh,
That's
that's
right.
right. Thank you.
I was wondering, have you guys considered, or has the speaker or anyone considered the repercussions of completely cutting Hilltop's funding?
A question has been asked about the Hilltop fee.
So I believe that this was discussed during deliberations. I'm in no way saying that the discussion there was sufficient or covered every single possibility or potential here. You can watch those deliberations to make that decision for yourself. I will say, I think inadequate conversation was had regarding a lot of the cuts. It was an option provided to committee members to send any fee managers questions during deliberations. They had an opportunity to ask questions after hearings, and there was time to ask questions regarding any of the concerns laid out during hearings. The hearing is also public. You can see what questions were asked for each of our fee entities. That's all on our Student Senate YouTube channel, and that is linked right here. Yeah, discussion was had. I don't have a personal opinion on whether it was sufficient, but it definitely did not cover all of the considerations here or discuss with everybody it could have had discussion with.
Zach Lemke? Yes.
Safe Ride received more than they're asked this year. What was the reasoning behind that?
So
A question's been asked about the Safe Ride allocation.
So I wouldn't agree with that statement. Safe Ride did not receive more than they asked. They received more than their minimal ask. Their scenario A ask was $7.30, and their scenario B ask was a $12.55 increase. They received their higher ask. Sorry, it's not both on the slides. I just wanted to keep this in line with the table that was shown on our live stream. I think that was the simplest way to do this. So this was an ask provided and presented to us. You can see it in the hearing for Safe Ride, and that was all discussed. So like you said, we granted them more than their minimal ask, and we granted their scenario B their higher ask.
Further questions? Bonadonic?
Hello. Oh,
You can just hold it if you want.
could you please provide a high-level overview of which entities will not be receiving funding in this proposed package for fiscal year 27?
Question was asked concerning which fee entities have been zeroed.
I'll try to do it off the top of my head to save time, but please look at the attached bill on the agenda. Look in the fiscal year 27 column, and everything that has a dash in it is not receiving funds. That would be recycling, student support and case management, Hilltop, the Kansan, and then some of the community supportive services. Here we go. Willow and the SDA Care Center. Sorry, the SDA Care Center and Headquarters Kansas, who did not receive funding last year also. Think I got everything? Okay, I want to be really clear about that. Sorry for any delay or confusion there.
Approximately 2 minutes for questions remain. Do we have any further questions? Seeing no further questions at this time, Bonadonic?
Point of parliamentary inquiry, are we able to ask questions to the members that were part of the fee discussion at this time?
To the chair, do you want to make it? I can answer it myself.
So if those fee members give a speech or if they would like to add a point of information, then you'd be able to give their own personal input, but if they're not giving a speech, then not, no.
Do you mind if I answer a bit too, really quick? So I will be chairing during speeches. I will recognize points of parliamentary inquiry as long as it relates to Robert's rules. Otherwise, please ask questions during the questioning period. Remember, it is the speaker's time. They can choose to take or not take questions.
All right, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take a second to pull up our fee package here because we will now enter our time for speeches. So a quick thing on speeches, you can pull something up. I would recommend just putting it in the finance council channel if you have like a present, I don't know what people have, to be honest. If you have like a presentation or something, share it in the finance council channel. It'll take us too long to pull it up here. I'd rather spend that time giving more speeches, if that makes sense. So I am able to get that all on the screen. I'm gonna zoom in as much as physically possible. Okay, that's as good as I can get it. So this will be on the screen as we do speeches. We're gonna do an hour for speeches, 6 minutes for each, which is the speech and questions. This just counted as my speech and affirmation. So that means we're now going to be looking for a speech negation. Am I good to reclaim the chair?
I now return the chair to Nathan Fitchcock. So we're going to be looking for speeches in negation. To be clear, please be mindful that this will be recorded. I recommend you go up to the podium to give your speech. And I think everything else has already been reiterated enough, except for the fact for these first couple rounds of speeches, I'm going to try to prioritize RSF committee voting members, and then we'll open it up to other students, finance council members, and then anyone else in the audience who'd like to give a speech. So I'm looking for a speech and negation from an RSF committee voting member. I'm seeing a speech and negation from Simra, an RSF voting member. Okay, 6 minutes starting whenever. And to be clear, speech and affirmation, you want people to vote yes on the speech package. Speech and negation, you want people to vote no. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Simra. I am one of the RSF voting members as a Rights Council representative. I am also the chair of Rights Council. I personally think that you should vote down the speech package for two simple reasons. One is that in one of the asks in our resolution, we asked for the student union services to take on or possibly explore the possibility of taking on the UDK, to which we also simultaneously cut them down $8. I don't think that is a fair ask for them. And I know during the discussion, there was a lot of rhetoric about our fee only being about 7% of their budget, and that kind of justifying being able to ask them more, but also not give them an incentive to accept it. I personally think that was wrong. The initial ask was 10. The reason we got to the number 8 is because I advocated for 5, and there seemed to be a lot of tension. So I was like, let's just meet in the middle at 8. That is not what I wanted. I personally think a decrease of $5 to the student union, student union, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think that is more than enough to address the issues that we had with them, but also not severely impact their services that are student facing, but also allows an actual, the possibility to look into housing the UDK, similar to how they house KGHK within their fee. I just think that is a reasonable outcome. I don't think that the fee package as is reasonable, nor is it really representative of the entire committee, but that's for other reasons. And the second reason that I think that we should vote this package down is because I actually believe that we should be giving more money to student-facing programs. For example, the Student Engagement Center. I think those are that's a really important entity on campus that we need to be focusing more of our efforts towards. For example, the campus cover. There was a lot of people that need the campus covered, and that is unfortunately one of the first things that is possibly going to go. And so I think for the sake of keeping our students at heart and their interests at heart, we need to give more money to the SEC. All that being said, I yield my time for questions.
Questions do we have? We can call on you and come up to the podium. What questions do we have for the chair of Student Rights and Affairs? Ivana, you can go first. Could you get the podium, sorry? So much faster. We could pass around this mic. I want people to think about their questions and be heard by everybody.
Thank you for your speech. I was curious if you could kind of elaborate on the compromise you suggested regarding the union building fees. Can you kind of elaborate what happened in that regards and why there was a need to compromise?
The
Yeah.
question was asked regarding the compromise on building fees.
And so first and foremost, I will say refer to the recording because that is the best snapshot of like what was going through committee members' minds when approaching those numbers and the rhetoric. So the $10 decrease ask was, I believe it was by in part due to alleged contract violations. It was also due to alleged, I guess like good faith. I erred on using that word, but the way I approached my initial $5 decrease is, and I ran on this too, it's that I found that the union wasn't really honoring their commitment to Student Senate in terms of just booking rooms for us and having like, rights over rooms. For example, like Alderson, to which the director agreed that Alderson is kind of like first come, or not first come, first served. Student Senate should always reserve that right, to which I believe that should extend to the other councils because we're also a part of Student Senate and the functionings. And I just think that with my council specifically, our first meeting taking place in Fraser, that should have never happened in a building that we are actively helping pay for, to which with an entity that we have an active agreement that, hey, you're gonna house us, and in return we'll pay your bond fee for the very building that we're standing in today. I think that was an adequate ask, and I just don't feel like they really met their end of the bargain. And so that was something that I voiced to them in the hearings, to which they seemed very responsive to. I thought a $5 decrease, again, noting that it's only about 7% of their total budget, it would be enough to get the point across, but not actually harm the functions of the entity. The reason why we got to number 8 is because I was actually part of the minority in that group. And so I didn't have a lot of voting power, as the voting record reflects. Like I constantly got shut down. I was one of the other no votes on this fee package. And so 8 was basically like, I got pushed into saying 8, and it seemed like something that everybody could agree on. But I didn't necessarily want an $8 decrease. Does it answer your question?
We have time for maybe one more question for our speaker. Seeing no questions, we have a question for our vice chair.
I'd like to ask what level the speaker thinks that the union should be funded at, like a dollar amount.
Question's been asked about the level of fees for the student union.
The fee of student union?
Dollar
I'm sorry?
amount. Specifically a dollar amount.
Oh, dollar amount? I think they should only get a $5 decrease, and so, I
So
can't.
71.90 minus 5.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that is all the time for our speaker. Thank you. I will now be looking for a speech and affirmation from a member of the RSF committee. I'm seeking a speech and affirmation from our internal affairs director. You'll have 6 minutes starting whenever.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm really excited to be here. My name is Kate. I'm the IA, and I'm very grateful to have been one of your finance council representatives. And I'm not going to talk for very long because I want to talk about what you guys want to talk about via questions, but I have a few framing items about the package writ large, and then I want to talk about what the previous speaker spoke about. So first, something that was really important to me and other members was lowering the fee package as a whole. This was a really difficult task because we did some incredible things like meet CAPS, Watkins, Safe PECs, and of course, Safe Ride's increased asks. We granted Safe Ride alone a $12.55 increase, and that money had to come from somewhere. And the reason why this is so important to me was because I had the pleasure of helping Nathan sort the fee survey results, and the number of people who asked us to lower it because $20 was the difference between eating and not eating for a week was devastating and eye-opening. It's nearly impossible to both increase services and decrease the fee, but I think we found an excellent middle ground here. When you cast your vote on this fee package, have those Jayhawks in mind, those who benefit most from these services, who don't have access to cars or external healthcare. The second thing I would like to say is that if you are not on the same page about the fee process, fee entities, or how committees arrive at certain decisions, I would really encourage you to ask us questions. I'm not saying that we, by virtue of being on fee, are like smarter or more capable, but we did sit through tens of hours of fee presentations and deliberations, and we want you to make the most informed decision that you're capable of making today. And then the final thing that I want to say is that the fee package does not exist in a vacuum. If you are taking issue with what was passed, it might be the case that instead of voting it down, you should be writing resolutions or taking advantage of our Wednesday night funding's ability to be used for initiatives. Not everything is deserving of being a fee entity, and that's a matter of fact, especially when we're trying to cut costs for students. Your duties as a senator do not begin and end with your votes during meetings. We should all be getting out there talking to people and doing things about the problems that we're encountering. I promise that this is something that I will be doing, especially in regards to recycling, and I urge you to consider doing that before you cast your vote. Now, in regards to what the previous speaker said, they cited 2 reasons for wanting you to fail this fee package. First, the union cut. I would say 2 things on this. First off, the union does not have to usurp the UDK. That's merely a suggestion. That's not a reason to vote down the package. And secondly, Simmer and I agree on this point. The union isn't honoring their commitment to us. They represent 20% of the student fee, and we only represent 7% of their revenue. That's absurd. They're not even going to feel this. Also, they're low-key extorting us. Think about how crazy those dining plans are. This is an opportunity for Student Senate to use the power of the purse, and that's not a reason to vote down the package. And then secondly, they urged us to consider giving more money to student-facing programs like the Student Engagement Center. This is not a reason to vote down the fee package either, because first off, we met their ask in full. They didn't ask for an increase. And secondly, we specifically passed a resolution asking that they not cut their student-facing services. So for those reasons, I believe that I'm really proud of this fee package, and I would defend it down to the dime. So if you came into this meeting wanting to vote down the package, ask me to justify these decisions. I yield my time to questions.
Do we have Zach? Go ahead.
How do you justify cutting Hilltop when many students would have to reconsider their entire financial future, right? They may have to drop out of college just to be able to afford childcare without that funding.
The question was asked about the justification for Hilltop.
Thank you, Senator. The thing that I want to emphasize in terms of the Hilltop cut here is that less than 60 students are being served by what is a relatively large amount of funding. And the kicker is that these students are still paying tuition to use the service. We're less than 3% of Hilltop's revenue, and they're likely not even going to notice this, but for us, this was the difference between reducing the fee and increasing it from last year. I personally don't feel as passionately about this as other members, but I do think that this was the right move for the student body.
The mic's not working right now, so we'll just go to the questions. I'll repeat them. I think it's not turning on is what I was trying to do. Sam?
I would like to ask, would you please further clarify the plan to use the Wednesday night funding, especially for recycling?
A question was asked about clarification for the Wednesday night funding and how they could put towards recycling or other initiatives.
Yeah, this is something that we just got the ball rolling on, so I can't give you specifics, but the first person that I messaged right when I walked out of the fee room was Jack Shaw, who's the chair of the SSSAB advisory board, and it's absolutely possible that they can access Wednesday night funding.
What other questions do we have? We have a question from Alex.
How can the speaker justify a cut to the Student Senate Activity Fund while also telling these groups and trying to remand these groups back to block and line, as I said?
A question was asked regarding the reduction of the student senate activity fee and recommendations for groups to move to block.
Yeah, I mean, first off, we're not paying off the deficit anymore, so that cut is pretty easy to make. Secondly, not all of our funding as is being used. So I don't really think that cut is going to affect the services that are applying to block and line.
We have a question from Ivana.
I was curious if the speaker could elaborate on what provisions would be made to supplement entities such as recycling, the UEK, et cetera, those organizations that were cut. Oh, Hilltop, sorry.
A question was asked regarding supplemental provisions for Hilltop, the UDK, and recycling.
Could you clarify what you're asking?
Do it really quick because we're out of time.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, have there been any resolutions in the work, any conversations about moving things to block funding, if you have any?
Yes, certainly, the UDK is advised to apply for block funding, and they did. Recycling has been advised to apply for Wednesday night funding, and that's something that I'll be offering.
That is all the time we have. Thank you. So with that being speech and affirmation, I want to see speeches and negation from either committee members or finance council members now. Any peer review committees or finance council members who have a speech and negation. One of parliamentary inquiry from Jeff Broker.
Can we extend time for one more question to the previous speaker?
That can be done. Please be aware that we have not extended time for any other speakers. Is there such motion? There's a motion by Zach. For how long?
2 minutes.
2-minute extension, second by Mason. Are there any objections? Seeing no objections, time will be extended for 2 additional minutes to provide more questions for our Internal Affairs Director. What questions do we have? Zach?
So you said that you believe that a lot of these organizations should seek other funding from other areas. Do you not think that puts unnecessary strain on, say, Block or Line or Feed to pick up that slack?
Any question was asked about the strain on Block and Line regarding reductions in allocations?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, the only additional service that we've advised to apply for say Block was the UDK because case management was already on Block, so I don't think that's going to be a financial strain. And then the only other fee entity that we've talked about receiving supplemental funding is recycling, and I think that would actually be a really excellent example of the good that Student Senate is able to do using our initiative funding or our Wednesday night funding. No other services are likely to receive supplemental funding in those 2 ways.
Speaker, your time is paused, so they'll provide a quick point of information. Please take advantage of all of the public resources available to you on the Student Senate teams. You have the presentation I just gave. That presentation has a slide for the Student Senate activity fee prepared by our treasurer, the tables prepared by our treasurer, and that shows how much money will go to every single fund under the Student Senate activity fee. You also have access to the fiscal year 26 budget book that tells where we gave Block and Line allocations and fee allocations for fiscal year 26. You can also look at records within the Finance Council channel to look at past applications for Block, among other details there. These are all public, make use of it. You can reclaim your time with 1 minute and 5 seconds remaining. What questions do we have? Seeing a question from Shay.
Could you just restate the reasoning for the union decrease?
Question is asked about the union decrease.
Sorry. There are a number of reasons. First off, we gave them a pretty significant increase for their renovations. So it's not necessarily this is a drastic decrease. This is in line with what they previously have been. Secondly, as stated, they haven't been prioritizing us booking our own room. And then third, and I don't want this to be the primary reason why we cut the union, but I have done a lot of research on the Bird Union Bond, and I do think that they are in violation of our memorandum that's attached to the bottom of our Constitution in a number of ways. And if we cut them like this, this kind of gets their attention to consider renegotiating the fixed bond.
So that is all the time we have for questions for our Internal Affairs Director. We're now going to look for a speech and affirmation for the fee package from voting members. Sorry, speech and negation, you're absolutely right. Speech and negation from our fee committee voting members along with Finance Council members. Let's go with Amar. We will have 6 minutes starting whenever.
Hey guys, so mine's pretty short, and the only thing I have to say is that with the recycling and the UDK and the other entities that were zeroed, they were done for the reason of sending them to Block, and I don't agree with that reasoning just because we're running based on the assumption that they will get Block funding, and I don't think that's right because without this funding, they won't be able to sustain their organizations. And then secondly, I don't agree with playing judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to taking funding from organizations based off of not agreeing with their ideals or their practices. Do I agree with Hilltop's practices? No, but I don't think that pulling funding from them is a good look for us. And I don't think we should use it as a means of punishment. And that's all I have.
Do we have any questions for the speaker? Do we have a question from Sam?
I was wondering if the speaker expects them to reduce the property value.
A question was asked about potential retaliation for the union.
So that's actually something that I agree with. I do think that I disagree with the cut to the union because I don't think that we should be ruining our relations with the union and the university. I think cutting them is kind of, especially with cutting them that largely, is kind of sending a negative message. And I don't know necessarily what that message is because I didn't agree with it, but I do think there could be some type of negative outcome from cutting their funding.
We have a question from Alex and then Kate. Okay, Alex would like Kate to go first. There's a question for the chair. This is my actual call. This is point of parliamentary inquiry. Okay, go ahead and ask.
Are entities allowed to participate? Sorry.
Hold on. Okay, I am going to pause. There was the time pause. There is a point of inquiry asked if fee entities are allowed to retaliate in response to cuts. I will say as the chair, I think retaliation is not the way that this should be framed in any way, shape, or form. As I have said and repeated multiple times, the fee managers are the trustees for their individual fees. They will use their allocations in whatever way they best see fit. So that will mean a reduction in services if they have said a decrease in fees would result in a reduction in services. Let's have the speaker reclaim their time and look for any questions for the speaker. Alex?
How does the speaker propose changing the fee package to include all of these items while still remaining at a flat fee with the new information coming from the conversation?
A question was asked to the speaker about their fee recommendation, given the recommendation for a flat fee.
Can I ask clarification?
Yeah, sure.
Like a flat fee in the total?
Maximum of $532.50.
Okay. So based off of my opinion, I don't necessarily think that we will be able to do a flat fee. I think maybe we would go like $1 or $2 over, but also in my opinion, I don't think going $1 or $2 over is going to anger the student body if they're able to get all the services that they want. I think they would be more angry if they got services that they want cut. So
I will pause your time and provide a quick point of information here. Yes, student body is always one of the highest priorities for us as a committee. On the timeline that I shared earlier, you will see that this fee package is also reviewed by KU administration and the Kansas Board of Regents. It can also be rejected or potentially changed at either of those stages. I can provide more detail on a later date about what that might look like. But just to be clear, if we don't follow the guidance of a flat fee that we've received so far, there is potential for backlash there. We have had a fee package remanded by the Kansas Board of Regents, or just sent back to us as flat in the past. So that is a concern to be had. I don't have any more information regarding what would happen if we pass a fee package higher than flat at the moment. You can reclaim your time at 3 minutes and 10 seconds remaining. What questions do we have? Esperanza?
Are you aware that the Kansas Board of Regents had been discussing about maintaining this to be flat and have something clear? And if that happens, how your ideas on how to apply to people who are previous moving up and $1 more, how would that look like if that would be visible?
A question was asked about what a proposed fee package would look like with flat fees.
So right now we're at $530, and if we added the UDK back at their $150 or $1.50 ask, then we would still be under the $532. So, I mean, adding as many entities as we can, even if it's by cents, I think would be better than nothing.
Really quick point of information here. We have to round to the nearest nickel, so the nearest 0.05 here, just for financial reasons. Okay. What other questions do we have? Go ahead, Henry.
I would like to ask, the speaker previously stated that they should have their relationship with the union. Do they feel like there should be any sort of consequences for the not living up to their agreement?
A question was asked about consequences for not living up to an agreement with the union.
I don't necessarily think that there should be consequences. I think that's more of like a conversation that can be had. But I do think pulling their funding because they're not booking the rooms that we want is what I've been hearing is not the best way to go about that. I feel like that's kind of messy.
What other questions, Shay?
Do you think the union cup was retaliatory?
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear you, Shay.
Oh, did you think the union cup was retaliatory because of the not voting?
The question was asked if the speaker believes the union cup is retaliatory.
I do think it was. I think there's a lot of sentiment against the university and the union. So a lot of the opinions that you can also hear on the recording and that I heard were based off of negative feelings about these entities. And I think it was kind of what I was saying before, playing judge, jury, and executioner. Like, I'm going to punish you because you did something I didn't like. So now I'm taking your funding away is what I got from that, which I don't agree with, to put out there.
We have around 40 seconds left for questions. Seeing no additional questions, thank you. Now looking for any more speeches and affirmation, I will open this up to the broader Finance Council or non-voting / ex officio members. We'll go to Tanya, our secretary, for the next speech and affirmation. 6 minutes with questions. During the order.
Okay, I can leave that.
A water bottle.
Oh, Amara, did you leave your water bottle? Okay, okay. I got it for you. No worries.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Okay. I would like to first and foremost point out that in giving this speech, I want to emphasize that I am speaking in my individual capacity. And while I may quote other individuals or publications, I am speaking exclusively as myself. Now, before I proceed, I should provide some context as to who I am. As many of you may know, I am Secretary of the Finance Council. However, I am also the chair of KU Student Health Advisory Board and coordinate KU Law's VITA Clinic and hold just a litany of other leadership positions on campus. Now, I've been a part of Student Senate since January 2025, and my constituency is KU Law, which is housed in Green Hall, right across the street. This is my first time participating on the RSF committee, and looking at the view results, one thing I want to make clear is that it is evident that most students want a reduction in their prior student fee, which I wanted to bring to them. Now, as a current and also future graduate student, I understand that many graduate students will be experiencing financial hardship on the account of the elimination of Grad Plus loans. So I want to lessen their financial burden however I can. My priority is to fund entities via fee who are responsible stewards of their money and perform functions which are non-negotiable aspects of campus and student well-being. This entailed granting the entire ask of Watkins Health Services, which serves over 12,000 unique students a year, as well as funding Safe Ride. I also emphasized funding free press on KU campus, such as the inclusion of a resolution to fund KJHK in its entirety and to use block funding to fund the UDK. Now, I realize the latter suggestion is more controversial, so I would like to take this time to explain some of that rationale. There may be a tuition freeze in place, as the chair stated, so the Student Senate and the Required Fee Committee should operate on the assumption that we cannot increase the student fee beyond flat. It is also likely that some fee entities will ask for a fee increase next year, so what will that do? Will we just dishome the UDK? Last year, we observed that placing the Kansan on the same funding entity as state caps did not yield proper discussion. In fact, during discussions of student senates required student fee last year, one senator had asked, should we fund the Kansan or defund caps and have people kill themselves, which was gross and improper. I predict that similar discussions will continue if we keep the Kansan on the required student fee alongside entities like CAPS, Watkins, and LSS. Simply put, these discussions are not productive and should not be condoned. Additionally, the Weekly Rose rightly asserted that the Student Senate is not defunding the UDK. Further, in recent articles, Bella Waters of the Kansan confirmed that the Kansan's advisor did apply for block funding, and that block funding, quote, provides a dedicated, recurring, and sometimes higher amount of financial support for organizations deemed essential to the KU community, such as the Kansan. Now, I understand that the RSF process has been under some scrutiny. However, the chair of the RSF committee did confirm that senators abided by the Constitution and followed proper procedures in our deliberations. At no time did Nathan make a vote during the deliberations, and in his capacity as chair, He exclusively served to moderate the RS subcommittee and vote on how proper certain procedures were. All complaints regarding the process were handled internally, both strictly to the terms of the Constitution, as Chair Binchuk has stated. Notably, he is also the only person with the authority to speak on behalf of the committee. Both the Pee Wee Pecker and Weekly Rose astutely point out that the existing criticism of the RSF process is anti-political and illogical, given the democratic and political nature of student governance. As a member of the fee committee, I can say that if the fee committee is sent to redeliberate, I will be operating under the assumption that KU will be subject to tuition freeze. Further, after speaking with my constituents regarding my fee allocations, I confirmed that my decisions were in alignment with theirs, so I can confidently say that I would not vote or act any differently as I did during this first round of deliberations. And I'm open for any questions.
Minute 50 for questions. What questions do you have for our speaker? I see a question from the chair of the organizers. The mic doesn't work, by the way. You can still go on.
Thank you. So you mentioned that you wanted to aid grad students with cutting costs. So how do you justify zeroing out Hilltop, to which, as a previous speaker had mentioned, that they don't offer free tuition, but they at least offer discounted tuition for small but very important number of students who that service is very impactful.
A question was asked regarding affordability for grad students, given the Hilltop cuts and tuition freeze.
Thank you for the question. This was something that I discussed at great length with other graduate students on the committee. One thing I did note is that we are less than 3% of Hilltop's fundings, and I would not have voted to zero out Hilltop if it meant the entire removal of the service. We also see that not only are less children enrolled in Hilltop, but there are less student workers, meaning that there's less benefits to the student body overall. Also, notably, KU has numerous alternatives to Hilltop, including the Child Care Subsidy Program, which is granted by the state, the Child Care Grant from KU, the Ballard Center, and Kansas Hero Relief, all of which do provide subsidized and affordable child care options or funding for child care. So I made sure to do my research and make sure that Hilltop is not the only option for parenting KU students and making that decision. So I made sure that I didn't want to prejudice any parenting students I represented and got approval from other graduate student representatives. So this was an informed decision I had made in good faith that this would not impair or impact the ability of parenting students to receive childcare services.
Okay, that is all the time we have for questions from our speaker. I'm seeing a motion from Ivana. No? We're out of time for questions, so seeing no motions, thank you to our speaker. Okay, so that was a speech and affirmation, meaning we'll now be looking for speech and negation. I think we've still got some time, so I would like to look for speeches and negation from voting, non-voting members of our committee, along with finance council members. Okay, you want to go ahead? And then after this round, I'm going to defer to members, folks who are not members of the Student Senate, to give them a chance to speak too. 6 minutes, starting whenever.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Ivana Dominic. I stand before you today as a senior, graduating in the spring, assuming everything goes well. But I'm also a student here that has served on various committees and bodies within Student Senate. I started my Student Senate journey my sophomore year as an engineering senator, and then I became the student body vice president, and now I serve as the university Senate vice president. I've worked with a lot of the entities that have come before us, and I'm here to strongly urge the committee to vote in negation of this resolution. I would first like to take a moment to thank all of the committee members for their time and dedication in coming together for these deliberations. It is a long and lengthy process, and for those students that have dealt with their own things and still trying to find a way to represent their interests for the body is really important and something that should be recognized. I think it is really important for us to remind ourselves that we as a body of student senators have a very unique power in our ability to appropriate such a significant amount of funds in the millions. And I often think that this power can be abused and maybe not taken to the most equitable approach. I think it is very difficult for us to see that many of the entities that are here before us today were not granted funds, considering that the students that did participate in the fee review survey, about maybe 20 or 2,000 or so, are simply a representation of our broader student body, which serves around 32,000 students. If we were to scale the numbers that we had for support of each entity, we would see that we are not only appropriating funds just for this 2,000 group, but for that of the 32,000. I would first like to begin by discussing some of the entities that were discussed and being cut. I would like to first begin by discussing the union. The Kansas Memorial Union is a lot more than just an entity that appropriates rooms for Student Senate. I know it is kind of hard to feel that Student Senate isn't just the whole body and everything, but I think it's also really important to realize that the union represents a symbol of legacy and also tradition for our university, and also something that I'm very proud to say that in my 4 years, I've fully taken advantage of those resources. I would then like to move on to the University of Daly-Kansan and other entities that represent the student voice. It is incredibly frustrating to see so many groups come in here for our fee deliberation in sheer upsets and sheer disappointment in the fact that we as students were not appropriating funds to best represent the interest of all students. And I think it's very frustrating to know that we are not being presented in the best light simply because of the dissent and simply the disagreement and lack of consent that we are seeing above our members. I think it is really important that we realize that all of the funds that people are suggesting that we send entities to, whether it be Block, Wednesday night, etc., are all just funds controlled by Student Senate. If anything, we should be working to consolidate all of these funds to make them more accessible. But I think most importantly, what we're forgetting is the trust that our student voice has, our student population, and all of these entities have for our role in Student Senate. We are here to appropriate funds on the interest of all students, not a select group, not a tiny group of people that is able to determine this, but for the body as a whole. And it's not our job to decrease or to eliminate the total amount of funding that any group receives, but rather a sheer appropriation of funds. Regarding Hilltop, I understand that the allegations have been brought regarding the past leadership and as well as other allegations. But regardless of our own personal decisions or the allegations, it is not really our place to decide what exactly these entities should do. If anything, we should be there to appropriate funds to represent those graduate student populations that have children and the undergraduate students. It's not our job to look at other potential alternatives, but our job to note that there are students in this campus that use these resources. And by us taking away student dollars from that, not only is it a testament to how much money we are providing to these students, but it's a sheer sentiment of our support for these groups. It is incredibly disheartening that the body decided to not go full with this. Lastly, and personally my personal favorite, I would like to highlight the recycling group, the small but mighty group on campus in addition to KU grounds that do whatever they can with what little power, resources that they have. Last year, student body vice president, I worked extensively with them for sustainability issues and to promote education regarding recycling around the university. It is really frustrating that a lot of the time that we see the groups that tend to not advocate for themselves tend to be at the risk of losing the funding and losing the resources. It is very sad to know that this group asked simply for a flat amount, similar to what they've gotten in previous years, but instead of that, we are not advocating for what they have asked for, and instead we are already scrutinizing the limiting resources they have on their trucks, their resources for their vehicles, and their staff. I think we saw this last year with Safe Ride, and I do not think this is the precedent that we need to follow. Regarding the recycling concerns for the university, we in fact do recycle, and I think education is something that we could all invest in as well. I think KU does a job of what they have given the resources to invest in single stream recycling, prioritizing corrugated cardboard and other materials. As an engineering student and one of the many that is actively involved in sustainability research, it is really frustrating to see that outside of Student Senate, outside of university, the implications that these decisions have on the world as a whole, but also more the precedent that it sets for other schools in the Big 12 that we do not need to fund recycling. I think it's appalling that groups like recycling that might not be here to provide their own testament or their own dissent with some of these decisions are often seen in a light where their funding is often getting cut. And I urge the student body to listen to the concerns as a senior who personally has no gain for fiscal year 27. And I urge the group here to use their democratic rights and to strike down this fee package and urge the amendments. Sorry. That was a lot. It's a lot.
The speaker is out of time, so we will go ahead and move towards looking for speeches and affirmation. Thank you.
Do you have any questions or no?
We don't have time for questions.
Okay.
So we are doing okay on time here, but let's keep rolling. I'm gonna look for speeches and affirmation from anybody. Anybody who would like to give a speech and affirmation, whether you're a student, voting member, anything like that. I'm just seeing Frederick, so we will go ahead with Frederick now, our graduate student body president. You will have 6 minutes for the speech and questions, starting whenever.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you. My name, as mentioned, is Frederick Omai, sitting in as the graduate student body president for this particular year. I wish, first of all, to mention that all opinions that I share are solely mine and not for the entire peer review committee that I sat in. I also wish to commend the chair and all the KU student leaders who sat in this particular peer review. The hours spent in, I'm sure it's more than 30 hours for the entire week. That is definitely commendable, and for all the hard decisions that we had to put in. I wish to also mention that our advisors have mentioned that we made a record break in terms of the time that we spent in making the decision. Yani, sorry to speak in Swahili, but we spent a really short amount of time to come up with this decision. One thing I'd like to mention is that when the peer review committee started their deliberations, there was brought up the surveys from all students, and something that came up is the outcry for particular departments, particularly Safe Ride, and also the need for ensuring that the student fees is not growing, or rather it's not increasing year by year with the, as we all know, the financial times that we are living in at this particular moment. It is quite unfortunate that within the peer review committee members, there are still people who were being led by emotions and not facts. And in this, I mentioned that we were having the mandate of looking at the financials and coming up with rational decisions, of which I believe to a huge extent we were able to do that, and that was replicated with the final votes in approval of the financial fee package that everyone was able to vote on. I wish to speak a little bit on Safe Ride. It was one of the very contentious departments that we were working towards getting back on track with the previous administration taking it off. I'm glad that even without fee increment, we were able to achieve such a goal. It is very commendable, and yes, there's that. Second thing is Memorial Union. Within the deliberations, I'd like to mention that Memorial Union stood out as having a huge surplus within their financial statements, unlike other departments. And there was the rational yet radical decision of reappropriating these funds, and for once not leaning towards what the administration are wanting us to do as KU student leaders, but what is actually needed for KU students at large. I'd like to mention that this is more of a vote of principle. For a long time, KU students' body government has not been felt by the KU student body. Why? It's because of moments like this where we need to stand by the needs of students and not the administration. We need to think on our feet and trust our decisions as well. Look at the financial statements, look at what is being provided, and not go by emotions. Be led with your rational, look at all the documents that are being provided to us. If they're not clear enough, ask for more. But with that, I'd like to mention that if we go back to deliberations, my only change would be probably for the Hilltop. I voted no for that, but the rest, I believe that fee review committee at large made a great decision. A about to say yes to this particular fee package, it's a statement towards the right direction. It's a movement towards the KU student body, government making rational decisions and trusting on their word and standing for the students that they do represent. I yield the rest of the time that I have for any questions.
We have around 1 minute for questions. What questions do we have? I'm personally seeing no questions for our graduate student body president. Seeing no questions, thank you. I am now going to look for a speech indication from absolutely anybody in the room. Can we do just, if you would like to give a speech at all tonight, a speech indication, raise your hand so I have a little bit of a count. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3. Okay, I don't think we'll have time for 3, but we'll probably have time for 2 more speech indication tonight. We'll go with Shay and then we'll go towards the back of the room for anyone else. You will have 6 minutes for your speech and questions. There's a point in the meantime. What is this?
Sorry. Read that whole sentence.
Okay, so a point, to clarify, a point of parliamentary inquiry was raised regarding a member of Finance Council and Shay, who's our Government Relations Director, who does not have voting rights within this council. I'm still gonna, let's have Shay go up. I had it open to everybody, but a lot of voting members have gotten to speak. Let's have some non-voting members speak. Shay's a student, she has speaking rights. Go ahead.
Okay, hello, everybody. I only take one, actually, that's a lie. I take 2 major issues with this fee review package. But before I get to that, I do want to mention that there are several points of this fee review package that I like. I like that we fully funded Safe Ride. I like that we're continuing legal services for students. I like all of these things that we did, but I do think that we sacrificed a good bit of crucial and necessary institutions of this campus to secure those. And I think those sacrifices had a motive behind them. When we were listening to the speeches in affirmation, they were talking about their motives for defunding the union. And these motives were purely motivated by a want and a desire to defend Student Senate. I would just like to say that the Fee Review Committee is not a part of Student Senate. The Fee Review Committee's job is not to defend Student Senate. And the Fee Review's job is not to stand in Senate's honor against whatever institution we think wrongs Senate. The Fee Review Committee's job is to stand for the 30,000 students on this campus, with the tens of millions of dollars that we are able to allocate. The fact that we allocated them in Student Senate's honor when Student Senate is 100 to 120 students at max, compared to the 30,000 students on this campus is ridiculous. Just want to make that known. Second, I don't like that the threshold for voting was lowered to 50%. I don't like that these fee review hearings were shortened and were the fastest we've ever seen. It should take more time to decide how to allocate $24 million for the entire student body. We should not want to shorten it or make it efficient in any way. It should be a hard decision. There should be debates, and I'm unhappy that these debates didn't happen to their full potential. Saying that, like I said, Safe Ride, LSS, CAPS, beautiful services that we should keep around. But the entire point of the Fee Review Committee is that we serve the entire student body. I think it needs to be renegotiated so that we can hit that mission. Thank you.
We have 3 minutes and 40 seconds remaining for questions. What questions do we have for our speaker? Let's start with them all.
I think the element of time has been brought up to discuss these deliberations. Can you kind of elaborate why you think time was an issue?
The question was asked about time being an issue during deliberations.
Now, I was on the Fee Review Committee this year. I was on the Fee Committee last year, and I can attest that that took forever and was completely annoying for everybody in it. But when I was on that committee, I also recognized that that's exactly what I signed up for. I signed up to go a day again, and a day again, as long as we disagreed on these issues. I don't like that we voted to lower the threshold so that these disagreements didn't happen. it should be 2/3 majority. The fact that it got changed to a simple majority meant these debates did not happen to the extent that they should have. You should spend hours on a couple things, especially things like the union that every single student uses. And I'm going to say this again, the fee review committee is not supposed to be the most efficient process. It's supposed to be grueling, and you're supposed to be unhappy during it because you're making hard decisions that affect 30,000 students on this campus. Just want to make that point again.
I'll pause your time and make a quick point of information. The 50%, the majority threshold was only for intermediate fee votes. The final fee package still required a 2/3 vote in order to pass. The final vote was 9 votes in affirmation, 2 votes in negation on the fee package as a whole. You can find a record of that on the Student Senate live stream. Our minutes were also live streamed there as we went through approving them in our second deliberations. Please let me know if you'd like access to those, but we're currently working on the changes that we made during the second live stream. 2 minutes and 19 seconds starting now for further questions. Seeing Tanya, I forgot that you were going to ask a question. Go ahead.
Okay. I would like to ask the speaker. Yeah, the mic. Okay. I would like to ask the speaker, notwithstanding this whole notion of Student Senate's honor, do you believe the union should face some repercussions despite assurances to fix plumbing and whatnot, issues that impact student safety, that they proceeded with renovations in violation of the fire code and impacting student safety?
I think we can definitely make that argument. I think that is a valid argument to make. I don't think that argument justifies a reduction of $8.50. That is tens of thousands of dollars that they now cannot put to making those renovations. If the union is in such bad shape and they're in the middle of renovations and now we're trying to give them the UDK, make them increase the HK budget. We're asking so much of this one institution that we then defunded tens of thousands of dollars. I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that's realistic, and I don't think it helps accomplish any sort of goal or repercussion that we try to establish on them.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions, maybe. Frederick?
Does the speaker believe that the students deserve a lower fee onto the current student fees, and also does the speaker?
Okay, let's just start with the first question. What does the speaker think of lowering the fiscal year 2027 fee?
Like by the $2 decrease? I think it's always great that we're able to do that, but I do think we need to recognize that we keep talking about inflation, which is important, and college inflation is definitely a thing. But I don't think the $2 traded out with the amount that we decreased the union and other services. I think if you put this back up to the students, and I am speculating here, I don't know all 30,000 students. I think if you put this back up to the students, they would say that they would prefer that those $2 extra to fund these crucial campus facilities. Because the things that got defunded, Hilltop, UDK, Union, all of these are representative and helpful to the campus. Not having them on this campus, not funding them to their fullest ability, and making sure that they can't live up to what the student's expectation is. Just for a meager $2 decrease, I don't think that's worth it.
Okay, that is all the time we have for our speaker. Thank you. So, a reminder that we have fixed adjournment here at 10 p.m. That is around an hour. We will definitely have time for 1 more round of speeches and affirmation and negation. Then going forward, we're going to have to be really mindful of our time because we'll have to get recommendations down if the speed package fails. With that being said, are there any speeches in affirmation from absolutely anybody in the room? Point of parliamentary inquiry from Sam. We have to end on a speech in negation before we vote. There has to be an even number of speeches. The initial presentation acts as a speech in affirmation. Are these points or are these? There's motion. I think we're going to still continue with some speeches. Are there any speeches in affirmation from absolutely anybody? Seeing no novel speeches in affirmation. Okay. Without objection, there's a speech in affirmation. Can be really short.
Does it, I'm part of,
Point of parliamentary inquiry from
do we
Henry.
need a speech of affirmation from someone who's speech education?
If there are no, yes, to be clear, as speech and affirmation, you have to be advocating for a vote yes on this bill. If you are not doing that, you'll be gaveled down and no longer recognized. That being said, are there any speeches and affirmation? We have a speech from Angel. Okay, 6 minutes starting now.
I know there's been much debate about the process. I know there's much concern about certain fees canceled out and zeroed out, and I'd like to specifically speak on something that I fought majorly on, and that was the UDK. I know that there's much concern about defunding a voice for students on campus, and I will say, I get that, right? I was in fee review last year, and I saw the harmful rhetoric that was rendered by, not to make accusations, but previous administrations and their works, who vowed to zero out the UDK because they felt there were abuses by the UDK. And I would say, sitting there during that process, I was sick and tired of those arguments. And my whole onset since that has been to defend the UDK. And I know people might question here, say, well, if you're trying to defend the UDK, why are you zeroing it out? That's a fair question. And that's why I've pushed it to block funding, and I fully vowed to fund it in block funding. But the main purpose of that zero out with the resolutions that I accompanied with it was specifically to address the unions absorbing the UDK with the specificity to defend it from political rhetoric that we've seen for numerous years. And of course, there had to be cuts across the board. I mean, as we've seen, there might be the call to keep the fee flat. Cuts had to come somewhere. We fully funded Safe Ride, and we funded a multitude of other entities on campus, making sure that certain services maintained, such as transportation caps, et cetera. And I fully defend my decision-making in that process because I secured the vote for graduate students and graduate student interests. And I will yield the rest of my time for questions. I think I've addressed everything that I wanted to.
Okay, what questions do we have? To be clear, you don't have to take questions if you want to. We don't have to ask questions if we don't want to. Alex, go ahead.
How does the speaker plan to fund the UDK in an already full block funding situation with both the UDK and potentially recycling added into an already full allocation that had to deny requests last year?
Any questions as regarding plans to fund the UDK?
Well, I will say there was the move to increase block funding this year, as well as we will see when deliberations commence, the 27th.
Block deliberation, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What other questions? We have a question from Yvonne.
Does the speaker have any comments regarding the cuts to the Hilltop fee and recycling?
The question was asked regarding Hilltop and recycling.
Yes, I think I stand by the committee's statements with Hillside being specifically with the child abuse allegations. While I do understand there are concerns about that in terms of tuitions for students, I think that's something that we need to focus on specifically when it comes to that. To your second part of the question, recycling. I don't believe that should come out of the students' pockets to pay for recycling on administrative buildings and other buildings on campus besides housing. I think that should be left up to the university to fully fund it, not out of the student pockets.
Further questions? We have a question from, we'll go to.
So Tanya was behind you first.
Okay, we'll go Simran, Tanya, Mia. Simran.
No, okay.
3,
I
go.
heard, okay. So you mentioned that, okay, my question is, do you think that zeroing out Hilltop might be more detrimental to fixing the problems at Hilltop, considering the leadership change?
The question was asked about zeroing out Hilltop due to leadership changes and other changes.
That may or may not be evident. We'll have to wait and see. I think if anything, it calls for concern with a reorganization of the institution in itself to further develop to become better.
Okay, what was that order? Is it Tanya, then Mia? Tanya?
I would like to ask, could the speaker elaborate on some of the, I suppose, facts presented during RSF that call into question the efficacy of campus recycling?
Sorry, can you note specifically to what you're referring to? Sorry, I didn't.
I think that, I'll see if I can clarify, we'll go back if we need to. I think the question is regarding what comments were made during deliberations regarding the efficacy of recycling from your
That
understanding.
called into question how effective recycling on campus is.
I think the rejection rate specified in the presentation, I think caused for alarm. especially when it goes past that into third-party vendors who then buy the recycling.
Okay.
If I recall.
Mia, what's your question?
Yeah, I'm just curious how you justify certain entities, I believe it's in UDK, possibly recycling. I know students were management going into block funding under the argument that they shouldn't be funded through fee or by student fee dollars. One block is simply allocation from fee dollars. It's about 800,000 of that broader 24 million. Can you clarify that distinction?
Well, I think that money is specified for those additional entities while the fee review process in itself is specified for student services, and that money is set aside specifically for those entities. So I think that is the general justification that I'm working on.
We have a question. Sorry, we have 1 minute remaining for questions. What questions do we have? We have a question. Anyone who hasn't asked a question yet? Seeing none, we'll go on.
The speaker had suggested that recycling should not be an entity funded by student dollars, but should be funded by the administration. In the case of the administration, she does not fund recycling. What would happen then?
The question was asked about administration funding recycling.
I think that is something we'll have to wait and see as well. I mean, I can't comment on that specifically. I mean, that's left up to the administration to decide when they get to that, potential.
We have time for around 1 more question. Okay, Mia, go ahead.
What gives you confidence that the administration would pick up the bill for recycling or other student services that are not fully funded or funded at all, considering how much the university has in deferred maintenance costs that they are still on the books for, likely that they would not something like recycling?
A question that's about administration funding recycling and other entities given deferred maintenance and other expenses.
I think a more appropriate question is why do we see fit to raise the pay of certain high-ranking officials at this university as opposed to funding these entities?
Okay, that is all the time we have for speeches. Here, we still need to end on a speech negation. So I will recognize absolutely anyone in this room for a speech negation. Please raise your hand if you have a speech negation. You want people to vote no on the speech package. Mia, you have a speech negation? Is there anyone else? Okay. Seeing nobody else, Mia, go ahead. From Alex? Okay. You want to ask?
You were on the committee.
To be clear, there's time for more speeches during assembly. If this passes, that is. 6 minutes, starting whenever.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I came late from Community Affairs, so I apologize if I'm reiterating any information that has already been said. I want to bring up why I voted no on the fee package as a participating member, and I believe it's a little bit different than discussing the actual individual entities that have been covered tonight. I would second the student body president's comments from our previous students' assembly meeting that discuss a matter of collusion within the committee. There has very clearly been a group of members in a predetermined group chat. I believe the beginning of the group chat, from what I have seen, I was not a member in it, but I was sent screenshots from a whistleblowing member, and the beginning of the group chat was called Required Student Fee Coalition. I believe that organizing votes in this manner online outside of the broadcasted deliberations, which are intended to create transparency for Student Senate, is antithetical to the deliberative process that we participate in and that we put our trust in when nominating these members. I know for a fact that there was a spreadsheet sent to this group chat that had a breakdown of how student fees were supposed to fall. These members were orchestrating the agenda in terms of which fees were discussed when. And as a member, this is my second time in Required Student Fee Committee. And it was just incredibly disheartening and discouraging. And I think it completely breaks down the integrity of the fee process. I think you should vote no on this package to show these members that this kind of politicization of something as important as a student fee is completely unacceptable, and that all deliberations should be had on the live stream out loud for everybody to discuss and agree to, so that entities who are affected, the students who are affected, can understand the full rationale of these decisions made, rather than just, hearing half of the conversation on the live stream, rather than having 5-6 members just fighting pointlessly for their voices to be heard, when decisions had already been made outside of the room. So I would vote no on this package. I can address my opinions on specific fees if you would like, or any further questions you have, but that is why I think this package should be a no vote.
We have 3 minutes and 37 seconds for questions and around 50 minutes remaining for the package here tonight. We still need to take it to a vote, and if it fails, we need to discuss recommendations for the fee review committee. We'll do a really short, like 5 to 10 minute period of points of information from anybody who hasn't spoken yet, just to make sure that everything that needs to be discussed is out there. But first, we need to continue with our questions here. 3 minutes and 37 seconds, starting with Ivana. Ivana, not Ivana. Yeah, is that correct? Okay, it's Ivana.
As a second-time fee committee review member, were there any similarities or differences from last year's fee review that you could care to comment?
Absolutely. I think last year was a very different spot. I believe we had about $30 of asks in general for all of the entities and about $10 of an increase from KBOR to work with. At the time of deliberations this year, keeping it flat because of possible tuition freezes was not a point of discussion. I don't know why that's being brought up kind of post-emptively as a piece of rationale when it was not in discussion and deliberations and was not a point of information disclosed to all committee members at the time. This year we had about $15 to work with in our proposed increase from KBOR, as well as $11 that was freed up from a bond from, I believe, the rec center. And with all the scenario A asks from all of the fee entities, some had more or less depending on their backup scenario B, but granting all of the scenario A asks would have left us under that top budget line. So I was just shocked, basically, at the kind of recklessness and carelessness of striking out certain entities, of creating these kind of made-up rationales that certain groups should be funded through block rather than fee when it's the same student dollars. Block is just technically a more competitive group, and we're pushing, the UDK. There was talk of recycling being in it. There's talk of Hilltop possibly getting everything that a certain group didn't want to fund through fee so that they could get this $2 decrease was pushed to block and promised to everybody, because there are a lot of members on both block and fee, that, oh no, they'll get their ask. When I would like to point out a service that hasn't been talked about much, student support and case management. They were coming to us for the first time. They were on block for the last 3 years, and they moved to required student fee, asking for about $4 to keep their operations because they had about $2 from block and $2 from grants that were expiring. So they needed about $4 just to keep their current level of operations. This was completely disregarded, and the fact that they said in their presentation to us that they had struggled to get their full ask from block was completely disregarded. It was said that they would get their full ask as much as they needed, despite now having to compete with the UDK and these other entities. There's just a complete lack of logic, transparency, and follow-through in terms of what members, and specifically members who are part of this external coalition, were saying and were convincing other members of, despite clearly knowing better, as they are top members of Senate, repeating members of Senate. And in comparison to last year, when we were in a much worse financial situation, we needed the full $10 asks just to keep the buses running last year. There was so much more integrity, transparency, and respect for student fiscal responsibility and what these entities do than there was this year. This year was just a predetermined plot and a waste of 8 hours because nothing really was decided outside of what was already decided on the group chat.
We have maybe time for one more question from Ivana, if it's quick.
Short my butt, huh? All right. Would you agree or affirm that the integrity and the genuineness of this package is therefore compromised by the incident that occurred on deliberations?
Absolutely. I think there is no integrity within this package, and I think it should be voted down so that the members can reconvene without this external deliberations and to hopefully have better intentions going into a differently formatted package.
Okay, thank you. That is all the time we have. So currently, the only motion that is in order is a motion to vote on the fee package. Let's hold off for 1 second. I think we'll get through this all if we do 5 minutes for extra points of information. I'm looking for people who have not had a chance to speak at all tonight. If you have a point of information, anything you would like to share about this fee package in front of us or discussion that has been had here tonight. We do need someone to defer speaking rights to Jack Credo. I'm seeing Jeff Brooker. Okay.
I appreciate that. I just want to make a couple of points, but first, I do congratulate this body for making hard decisions. It is hard, and funding is always a touchy subject. But I do want to just make a couple of points. I have 4 points really here that I want to make about some things that have been said about the union tonight and maybe in deliberations. And they're not in particular order. I want to talk about the agreement that it sounds punitive that we're being held accountable for. One, I want to say the Emily Taylor Center and SAPEC that in the agreement for the Birds Union are supposed to be housed out of this building. Moving those entities to other locations or disbanding those entities was 0% decision by the unions. That is a Dr. Durham Student Affairs decision. We just house them and provide them spaces. I would say we even went out of our way to the discovery room here. We allowed SAPEC while they were in here and SFL to use that room, which is a revenue generating room for us. We allowed them to use it rent-free for 6 months as a conference room. So we try to accommodate those people that are in our spaces. As far as asking for a $5 cut to the union because we're not honoring an agreement for spaces, my argument would be, hey, look, one of our principles in the union is to create shared understanding. If I knew that was an issue, we could have deliberately talked about it and we could have come to an agreement. Right? I've been here 2 years. I don't know how all the old rules have been operated. But I tell you, the union team is here to work with you as well as faculty and staff in order to provide you the best experience, because our mission is to create a sense of belonging and community. There was a comment that we have excess funding and that we're not figuring out how to fix pipes in the building. I will tell you, we are using the R&I, the repair and improvement fee, which is about $1 million a year from students. We are using that for student-facing improvements, like the 4th floor renovation, where it's more inviting and it's a better place to hang out. All the stuff behind the walls is what that excess funding, if you want to look at our balance sheet, we are looking at to take out a $12.5 million loan to replace the electricity and the plumbing in the building. And that is all the funding and the revenue we are generating off our operations. So we are wisely using the revenue in order to put it back into the building to create a better place for everybody to be in. And then I just want to clarify the 6340 that the old funding was at. Yes, that we were at 6340, but the Student Senate also funded the $8.50 for SUA and KJHK. If you go back to just 6340, we are still deficient $8.50 for those programs. So now we are at a decision point where we either do we defund SUA and KJHK, which I would argue are two great organizations that serve the entire student body for belonging and community. And, first-time freshmen in their first semester where they're having a hard time. So the $850 is still about a $400,000 cut to our organization, although that doesn't seem like a significant amount of money to an organization that generates the revenue we do. It is significant and it will have impacts. Either we don't improve the building and our facilities, or we don't have student programming. So I just wanted to clarify those things. Thank you for your time.
We have time for maybe 1-2 more points of information like that, and then we really gotta get going. Let's go over here. Try to keep it to a minute, 2 minutes. If this passes tonight, you'll also have a chance to students assembly, and so will everyone else.
Thank you. My name is Corey Burke. I'm the Executive Director of Hilltop. A few things I'd like to just quickly say. The number 3% came up quite a bit. To make sense, we are working at a deficit. So when you're working at a deficit and 3% of the budget, it will have a high impact on Hilltop if we're totally defunded. It will impact our ability to hire students, and it will definitely impact our ability to give discounts to our student families. It's approximately about a $400 difference in tuition. And so the information that was shared that there are alternate childcare sources in Lawrence is true, but not alternate sources that offer tuition discounts for their children specifically to KU students. That is up to $400 less a month. So I know that I have talked to some student families who are very concerned about their ability to continue being a student. It also impacts our ability to provide operations. Some of our funds go towards that. And I do agree with someone in this wonderful group who mentioned that if you defund us, you actually take away our ability to continue the very hard work that a courageous group of people have done to address some pretty serious issues that happened in the past. And the number one thing is training, and that training costs money. So I do request that some careful consideration be made on this.
Thank you for the point of information. We have time for maybe one more similar point. Anybody who has not spoken would like to make one? Doing a little rotation, let's go to Alex. One.
Yeah, I'll make it pretty quick. I'll be completely honest, I'm worried about the feasibility of this. We just got out of a budget crisis where we had to pay off an overrun, and yet we're going into a very similar situation. If I had done a speech, I would have been able to pull up what we funded with Block and Line last year and tell you that we're cutting Block by $55,000. But if you actually look at what we funded with Block last year, I would argue that I want to keep every single piece of that at the levels that they like. And yet we're still throwing the UDK, we're potentially throwing recycling, we're potentially throwing Hilltop even if they apply. We're throwing these onto Block where there's already been an over ask of the funding last year, and yet we're throwing more groups on, but decreasing the funding by $55,000. I'm concerned about the feasibility of attempting to fund each of these groups the way that the students would like with the funding that we are allocating.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the time we have here tonight for our fee package. The only motion that will be in order right now that I will recognize is a motion to vote on the fee package as a whole. I'm seeing such a motion from our vice chair, and I'm seeing a second from our secretary. Seeing no objections on the motion to vote on the fee package, that poll will be posted. It requires a 2/3 vote to pass. Just remember, no discussion regarding this vote shall be had while the poll's posted.
It's posted.
Poll is posted. There's a lot of talking, 20 seconds left, please vote. Is closing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. With 4 votes in approval and 15 votes in negation, this fee package clearly does not pass. This means that we will reconvene within the following 2 weeks to bring a more satisfying fee package here to the Finance Council in cycle 10. With that being said, we have 35 minutes remaining for this meeting before we've all got to get out of here. I'm looking for discussion on what we would like to give the fee review committee in terms of feedback or recommendations going forward. I'm going to request that each piece of recommendations are provided in exact text form. Easiest way to send that is just send it to me on Teams. Personally, I'm Nathan Bitchcock. You don't know. Send it to me on Teams in text form, then we'll have some discussion on it. I'll also recognize informal discussion if we want to do that, but we need a text form of each recommendation, which we can then have a motion for, and then we would second and vote on it if it's not adopted with unanimous consent. Any questions on that process first? Points of parliamentary inquiry regarding what we're looking at right now. Seeing no points of parliamentary inquiry, are there any motions initially? What is this? Motion to enter informal discussion for how long? We need a time limit?
7 minutes.
7 minutes of informal discussion. 7 minutes for informal discussion. Is there a second? There's a second from Henry. Are there no objections? Seeing no objections, we will now enter informal discussion for 7 minutes. We will start out with Jeff. Okay.
I think that we should keep the union at the $5 decrease that Simra has. Simra and I think I also gave a speech talking about a $5 decrease during the fee deliberations instead of an $8 decrease and $5 decrease. It needs to be during the starting session.
Let's see if we can maintain informal discussion on the unions for now. Any other comments regarding the unions? We can do a show of hands to kind of build consensus here. Any other comments regarding the unions? Let's go to our graduate student body president.
Thank you, Nathan. I'd like to also just mention that the revenue that comes from the KU students and it is only 7% of the union's revenue. I'm not disregarding that 7%. I'm just putting it out here for our attention. And also, the speaker during the hearings also mentioned that the KU Memorial Union works primarily as a business. So keep that in mind.
What other comments do we have on the union? Sam?
I believe that the union should be cut, however, both the $8.50 or the $8 and the $5 are too extreme, and that cannot be touched. I would argue somewhere more around $2.50.
So we have heard a $5 decrease and a $2.50 decrease, along with the current $8.50 decrease. Do we have any other discussion on the unions?
I would like to say, I would still like us to operate in like, I suppose, a deficit for a fee. Keep in mind the fact that a lot of graduate students have loan caps now. So I don't know, like I can agree with, I'm amenable to a $5 decrease. I do think a decrease is necessary, but I also acknowledge the fact that the union does provide essential services for students and their student facing like KJHK and SUA.
Do we have anything else on the unions? Keeping in mind we have 5 minutes left for informal discussion. I'm seeing nothing here, so we'll do a quick show of hands. We will do in the order of the $8.50 decrease we currently have, a $5 decrease, and then $2.50, and we'll see what the hands look like for each of those.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
Point of parliamentary
Just restate that a little bit slower.
Thank you.
Sorry.
We will do the $8.50 decrease, which is what is currently in the fee package. We will also do hands for a $5 decrease after that, and then hands for a $250 decrease. Raise your hand for anything that you would vote for if that was presented in Finance Council 2 weeks from now. So, $850 decrease, which is currently in the package. I am seeing 1, 2, 3 hands for $850. Let's see hands for $5 decrease. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 hands-ish. Let's see hands for the 250 decrease. Am I doing that wrong? Yeah, 250.
We're advocating a decrease, right?
Yes. Sorry that it's confusing. Whatever that big red number on the slide was, we did $850 and then $5, and now we're doing $250. Does that accurately reflect what understanding? Okay. For now, yeah. Just vote no if you want other options. Okay. 250 decrease. Hands. I'm seeing one hand. Okay. So with that, our current recommendation to the fee review committee as of this informal discussion is going to be a $5 decrease as opposed to an $850 decrease. Let's keep going because we are running out of time. What other topics would you like to discuss?
As we said to you in teams, I would like for the entities that have been fully cut to be reconsidered, potentially with the amount that would get us to a flat fee being distributed amongst them.
I will read that out to you.
Okay. I have received a recommendation for the fee review committee to reconsider the entities that have been fully cut, consider splitting the amount of money to keep a flat fee between these entities. Please raise your hand if you are opposed to this recommendation. I am seeing no hands in opposition to this recommendation. Okay. Just to be
Could you tell us approximately what that would be?
Sure. I'll pause really quick. To be clear, I think the best way we could do this with the time we have remaining is to vote on all those recommendations at once. That's how we did it last year too. Someone just said all the recommendations and then we all agreed upon them. So that's the point of informal discussion here, is to reach an understanding of what all our recommendations are. So you'll have a chance to vote no or object if you want to add additional recommendations, something like that. So the question of how much that would be, it is $2.20 that we have remaining to get to a flat fee, from my understanding. And to reiterate one more time, the recommendation from Sam Monty is to reconsider the entities that have been fully cut and consider splitting the amount of money to keep a flat fee between these entities. Once again, is there anyone opposed to this recommendation? Alex, did you start with?
I'm generally opposed because then we're giving like 35 cents to each of these orgs. Like we have $2.20 to work with. If we're splitting it between 4 orgs, that's 55 cents a piece. That amount of money, while is like $25,000, it's not an actual solution.
Let's go to Ivana real quick, and then we'll see if we.
I have a contentious point of discussion, but I believe that the body has the.
Let's focus on Sam's.
It is related to Sam's thing, and then piggybacking off of Alex. I'm curious if we could look at the supplemental amounts that were allocated on top of the asks for groups such as Safe Ride, the rec, specifically the student rec and fitness center fee, and then the recreation facility maintenance, and then I said Safe Ride already, and then SafeEc. I'm curious if the group has any thoughts on that, just to reappropriate those funds, so we're not only giving those 3 entities that were defunded just 30 cents.
Just for a point of information / reminder, please remember that a lot of those increases above the asks were related to a scenario A and B. That will be most clear during the hearings. Please rewatch the hearings on any of those points where you might feel confused there. I actually don't know at this moment if anyone was granted above their highest ask. If someone would like to confirm, nobody was granted above their highest ask. To my knowledge also, I hope so. Please let me know immediately if that's wrong, but nobody was granted above their highest ask. And there is a spreadsheet somewhere, an older one, that has their highest asks on there too. Let's keep going on this topic of what to do with that $2.20, Esperanza.
I would say that
it's very hard to work with only $2.20 because some organizations will not be able to operate with 30, 40 cents, especially I would say recycling. We must look at probably decreasing some organizations that may have received a lot of money last year. For example, CAPS. CAPS received approximately $4. In my opinion, in last year they received a lot of money. In my opinion, they could receive approximately $2, and then we could have $2 extra to work with in other organizations. Also, Watkins services, we worked on their scenario B, but they say during their meeting, during their deliberations, that they could operate successfully with $2 for the next academic year. So we could have that way $6 to work with.
We're out of time for informal discussion. I will recommend motions to extend it in a second, but first, let's do a show of hands just to see where we're at on this recommendation, because this is the only one that's been provided to me in text form. Never mind, 2 more have been offered, so we'll get to those if we extend time. Let me read it one last time. A recommendation for the required student fee committee to reconsider the entities that have been fully cut and consider splitting the amount of money to keep a flat fee between these entities. Let's do a show of hands. We'll do a show of hands for, would you vote yes on this recommendation, and then we'll do a show of hands for no. So yes on this recommendation. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Seeing 10 yes. Let's see no. 1, 2, 3. Okay, 3 no's. So it will be included as it stands here at the moment. Motion to extend time.
Motion to extend time by 10 minutes.
Motion to extend time by 10 minutes by Alana. I'm seeing a second from Jeff Brooker. Are there any objections to extending time for informal discussion by 10 minutes? Seeing no objections, I will get that stopwatch started, and let's see what else I've received on Teams.
I just wanted to piggyback off the previous speaker's comment about decreasing walk-ins. It was also stated during the hearings that if we did not grant walk-ins their full $4 ask, they would have to consider paying co-pays, charging co-pays even for office visits, which would impair the ability of students to have access to free and accessible healthcare on campus as a categorical matter.
So I received in the meantime a recommendation from Alex Reed. The recommendation reads, a recommendation for the required student peer review committee to increase the student senate activity fee by $2.20 from current proposed levels to cover the increase in groups applying to block funding in lieu of losing direct fee funding. To clarify, this does seem to conflict with the last one. So what we'll do is we'll do a show of hands between them. I don't want to pass conflicting things here. Let's have discussion on this recommendation here in the meantime. So we did a majority of people who wanted to allocate the $2.20 across the entities that have been zeroed out. And then now we have some, a recommendation for that $2.20 to go to student senate activity fee. So final thing we'll do here is a show of hands between each of them. Let's have some informal discussion though, starting with Mia.
Sorry, I'm still trying to pull up my numbers, but just for a point of information, I believe the general cut was, no, I'm wrong, never mind. I understand.
Who else would like to speak on the student senate activity fee increasing by $2.20? Or just what do you think about the student senate activity? Zach? Okay, we'll get to you.
I understand the merits of the point, but I am kind of curious as to what guarantee we have that by reappropriating the fund to the student senate fee, that the entities that were not granted funding in the student fee process will be granted funding in this.
Okay. We'll go to Sam.
Yeah, along with that, block funding hasn't happened yet. There's no guarantee that it comes to these entities are going to get funding in the long term. I understand that a lot of people who are on block funding have said that they are going to vote for this, but that's not a guarantee.
Also, quick point of information, block funding applications will reopen for an additional 2 weeks from February 15th. And all deliberations and for line and block will be pushed back another 2 weeks. what other discussion do we have? I believe that we'll put block deliberations right before spring break, if I'm not mistaken. Okay.
I want to put forth the recommendation to consider giving a small haircut to Safer.
Okay. So there's been discussion on reducing safe ride. Let's keep it to these two competing proposals first, and then we can move on in the order I'm receiving team messages. Let's do a show of hands for what Sam submitted versus what Alex submitted. So from what we have from Sam is to reconsider the entities that have been fully cut, consider splitting the amount of money to keep a flat fee between these entities. And then from Alex, I have Alex rescinds. Okay. Seeing that, let's move on with next business. Okay. I think we're good on teams. Let's go to Zach. You can provide some more context if you'd like.
You know that there was a secondary ask for Safe Ride that was a lot lower than what they are currently slots receive. Now, I don't think that we need to go all the way that low. If we were to take maybe $2 off that, I think there would be a lot more room to be able to help some of these organizations that are zeroed out currently.
Okay, I will quickly repeat this, but also recognize a point of information from anybody to provide more detail. I believe it was presented that their scenario A ask of a $7.50 increase would restore Safe Ride to 70% of service capacity. If there's anyone with. Okay, we'll go to Sean.
So the scenario A asked for Safe Ride was to return them to the dollar amount they were at last year before the large cuts in last year's year. This would not return to that same level of service.
They were relying on a large carry forward last year, so they would not be returned to the same level of service they were at last year in that about 1250 ask. And the number that we've settled on, which is the scenario B ask, is the amount they would need to have a full return to service to at least the level of that last year.
So we have heard discussion on Safe Ride for, give me 1 second, guys, sorry for the delay. We have about 4 minutes, 50 seconds remaining. So I'm seeing in my notes a $12.55 increase, which was what was granted, and a $7.30 increase, which was their other scenario. As described here, that would not return full service, but still return Safe Ride as a program. So these will be two numbers that we'll do hands for, $12.55, $7.30. Does someone else have any other numbers on Safe Ride they'd like to discuss? $10.55. So that's in between. Is that being discussed? We want to do hands for $10.55? Okay. So those are the numbers we have: $12.55, $10.55, and $7.30. We'll do a show of hands for that in a second. I want to do a quick point of information. I'm very confused here constitutionally. There is currently a ballot referendum scheduled to go on the spring ballot. It has some number of signatures, I have no idea, to restore Safe Ride to the full fee. What I personally believe as the chair of the Finance Council it can do constitutionally is to force the fee committee to reconvene and consider that. That doesn't necessarily mean that they would have to do that, from my interpretation. There's been a lot of discussion here. I don't know the current status of that. We've been trying to resolve that post-fee review. If anyone else has additional information regarding the ballot referendum.
The current status of the ballot referendum, since the fee deliberation process regarding Safe Ride was quite successful with the full amount required to bring back the service in its full capacity, I left a little bit aside for the ballot referendum. However, if in the next meeting we substantially decrease the funds for Safe Ride, I'll need to return with the process.
I would like to ask a point of inquiry regarding the deadline for ballot referendums and how many signatures it may or may not have. I have been told by the chair of our elections commission that it does not officially exist until it has the signatures required, which is why I don't think it's on the legislation track.
Exactly. That's why I left a little bit aside because of how successful regarding the funds, the reallocation of funds for the service was. As I remember, it's 1361 signatures required. We currently have, I think, 220. I gotta check that again. However, it has been quite retired, the ballot for the moment.
You know the deadline is?
Last Friday.
The,
Last Friday.
I'm hearing the deadline is last Friday, meaning that this ballot referendum, and from my understanding, will not have the effect on the required student fee review.
No. that
It did get
bill-
extended.
bill didn't pass.
It got postponed indefinitely.
February 13th, it might be.
Okay, so from my understanding, this will not have an effect here.
Here's my hand. Since we are in a formal discussion, I think I'll ask a question to Margareta.
If it's really quick, 'cause I'm sure we're.
Yes, it's very good. I was, thank you, Margareta. I was curious if you could kind of elaborate on, the implications of decreasing, the safe ride allocation for this year. Yeah, and kind of how the impacts of last year have affected the operations for this year.
Were you able to survive, yes or no?
That was a question for Margareta.
Margareta DeFries from K Transportation Services. Cutting the fee last year resulted in us not being able to operate cars in the entire city limits. We had to reduce it to just one bus route on campus, Monday through Friday, to focus on academic work as we were told we ought to from the referendum resolutions from last year. So there was no safe ride service for anyone off campus at any time this year. That answers.
So we should do some hands-on safe ride. Let me make sure I have those numbers. I know the one off the top of my head, top end that we'll do first is 1255 current fee package. We have one in between that 1055. That sounds correct. We have one in between at 1055, and then we have 730. So first 1255. Hands if you vote for 1255. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, I'm taking 7 hands for 1255. Let's look at 1055. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 hands for 1055. And let's look at 730. 1. Okay. So 1055 is the number we've reached. You can raise your hand for none of them, to be clear. So you can vote no on our final resolution if you don't want to adopt any of them.
Yes.
We have 13 minutes remaining here. We have passed resolutions for Okay, so the current resolutions we have are a $5 decrease for the unions, a reconsider the entities that have been fully cut, and considering to split that amount of money to keep a flat fee between the entities, and then 1055 for safe ride. I received nothing on Teams. We will need a motion to enter in formal discussion or extend time. If we have any further discussion / recommendations here, I'm seeing such a motion from Jeffrey. For how long?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Is there a second? I'm seeing a second from Esperanza. Are there any objections? Seeing no objections, 5 more minutes of formal discussion. We can start here if there's anything. Anyone else who has any other potential recommendations for the peer review committee? We can only do recommendations from us because we're the ones who failed.
I just have thoughts. I think health is very important, and I utilize walk-in services a significant amount of time, and I understand the implications. However, what are our thoughts on decreasing the appropriation from the committee this year? Whether it's in cents, dollars, I don't know. Just a thought.
For
Watkins? Okay.
I'm extremely hesitant about cutting Watkins, but if we did, I would suggest cents, not dollars.
Yeah.
The non-voting member of finance, or voting member of fee, I will provide like a clarification that Watkins had not asked for an increase for the previous probably 4 years or so. But at this point, if they did not receive an increase, they were looking at either beginning to charge more for like lab treatment basically, or radiology and that vein of things, or charging students a small premium on appointments. So I'd be very hesitant to decrease the Watkins.
Anyone else have comments on Watkins? Jeff, just something else?
No, let's go to Tanya first.
Okay, Tanya, absolutely.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tanya. I do chair the Watkins Health Committee, so I work very closely with both Alan, like the administrative director, and Dr. Greg Nickel, the medical director of Watkins. Really, any cut, I'm hesitant about any cut, because per the fee hearings, any cut would result in a potential charge for office visits. Again, impair the ability of students to get access to free or accessible healthcare on campus overall. This was a priority for a lot of graduate students and a priority for the student body overall. Watkins is also used by about half of the student body, so I would prioritize the student body's needs here and not touch Watkins in the slightest.
I'd also like to talk about Watkins. Let's have some numbers out here. So I'm seeing the flat increase that we've granted. Are there any other numbers? Or you can talk about the flat too.
Well, just to kind of piggyback on what Sam said earlier, if we want to approach touching Watkins at all, very similar to Tanya, I'm also a member of that Watkins peer review committee. Paid a lot of attention to the figures that they gave us. Touching it at all is just kind of very similar to what Tanya said. But if we want to start going from somewhere, that may be the best place to do it. Just start with low cent amounts, like probably no more than 30.
Any last comments on Watkins? I've heard flat, 30-cent decrease, flat, whatever the request is here, and then 30 cents reduced from the request. We'll move on up, and we'll go over there.
I just want to make a quick comment and say that I think it's very, I think it is very honorable that everyone here is literally staying to have these conversations that are really difficult. I know we've been here for about 4 hours, and I think it's really impactful to hear that everyone in this room really cares about these entities. I think at the end of the day, there really is no right justification for which entities we decrease or increase. I think it's just a matter of trying to appropriate in the best possible way and allows every group to have funding. So shout out to everyone here that has stayed the entire time to make these decisions. They're hard.
Thank you.
Fisher Motors School of Pharmacy. I'm also on the Watkins Advisory Board. I think that something that's being overlooked is that with the Student Health Center, any increase of charges or co-pays that would go with appointments for students will cause a significantly inordinate imbalance in the availability of healthcare to the student population. And I really support the health of the student population, so I don't think we should be increasing Watkins at all.
Only numbers I heard thrown out were the $4 increase as it stands, and then 30 cents less than that, so $3.70. Let's do hands for the $4 and then $3.70. $4, how many hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay. How many hands for $3.70? I said 15, so then 16? Okay. How many hands for $3.70? I'm seeing 1, high fives. Okay. I think it's clear. All right. That brings us to all the time we have here for informal discussion. We can do up to 5 more minutes of informal discussion, and we gotta vote on the recommendations. Okay. Point of inquiry from Alex Reed.
I will say the current levels of funding they're at right now with proposed changes is a 70-cent increase. So And that is before distributing that to the groups we can request.
And then we also have that recommendation that we currently have to redistribute everything and get it to flat to groups that have been cut fully. So that one that's something that's going to be discussed by the committee. Is there any other points of inquiry, information? Okay, we don't have to be out of here right at 10, but that's when we should aim to adjourn, try to get on early here. So, are there any motions? A motion for 2 more minutes of formal discussion by Henry, I'm seeing a second by Sam. Are there any objections to that motion to enter formal discussion for 2 minutes? I'm seeing no objections, let's start with Henry.
I just wanted to ask, what are people's opinions about only sending the UDK to block funding? Are we against that, or?
All right, let's discuss sending groups to block fund.
How do you propose only sending the UDK block?
Like refunding the other groups?
Sam, or Henry, and then Sam?
Just the reallocation of the money to the other 3 groups, and then recommending UDK to block funding like the original.
I would say for UDK, we should give some funding to, in my opinion, at least.
So it seems like there's discussion of sending groups to block funding, and also discussion on the UDK. Let's talk about the UDK. I think that's a bit of a more well-defined area of discussion. What comments do we have regarding the UDK and any recommendations we might have for the future committee? I understand these topics are tied together, but let's focus on the UDK because we haven't talked about them yet.
I just want to put my perspective out there as to why I would support putting the UDK on block funding. Like I said, the student fee might be flat for the next year or foreseeable years. And I don't want to see discussion on the fee relating to, like, oh, do we want to fund the UDK or do we want to fund CAPS or see people kill themselves? And I think they have a lot, like there was last year. So I want to see the UDK with peer organizations on the block.
Okay. Anything else on the UDK? I haven't heard any clear recommendations for a number or a recommendation for the fee review committee. Please send that to me in text form if you have something here.
Okay, so I do have a question, and I'm not sure, are there any representatives from the UDK to answer my? Point of inquiry, what would be the most basic minimum ask that you could ask from the orientation operation?
Hold on, because like, what was the question? Can you repeat it?
Asking what the bare minimum ask for.
Okay, so
The question was asked about the bare minimum fee amount for the UDK. Let's hear from the UDK.
No, I don't know, I can't speak on that, I don't want to throw out a number and then like, yeah.
Okay, well, we're not in a formal discussion anymore, and I haven't received like a text recommendation. I'll really quickly check that to make sure. Okay, yeah, I'm not receiving anything over Teams. I don't think we've reached consensus here, so I don't think we can provide a recommendation regarding the UDK to the fee review committee. We can motion to extend time once again.
What we decided on, right?
Oh, well, let's go, a point of information from the director of council.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Corbett, the director of CAPS. I'm very appreciative of all the work that you all do here. It is incredibly meaningful. And as the fee manager for CAPS and the money that you all have granted to us, I've been here about 2 years, going on 3 here at KU, and your support has been immense. And so I offer appreciation for that as well. We've been operating in a deficit structure, and so we've been looking to do everything that we can to support you all, including just here in January, decreasing our fees directly to students for therapy costs. I was just overjoyed, frankly, when I saw the initial recommendations for our fee, and understanding that hard decisions are made. I just also want to offer perspective that I have tremendous respect for all the other fee managers that are connected to this process, and not that you need to take my recommendation, but if the $4 that you granted us above our basic, our base amount of $3, if that dollar were to be taken and be used for another fee entity, again, not that you need to take my recommendation, but I think student support and case management deserves every single dollar that they can receive. They received a flat, I think, no, they were funded on no level, and so I would gladly give up $1 from CAPS, because while they are not operating in a clinical capacity, they are impacting the mental health and academic success of students every day, and just want you all to consider that.
So I'm hearing discussion of and we're gonna go for like a point of information or maybe a bit of informal discussion, like really quick on this. But I'm seeing an idea thrown out for a dollar reduction for CAPS, meaning a $3 increase as opposed to a $4 increase, with a $1 increase going to student support case management. That would be the recommendation for the peer review committee. I really don't want to re-enter informal discussion. Are there any other points of information? Let's see. Is anybody opposed to this? Seeing that nobody's opposed to this. Is this clear? Okay. Seeing that nobody's opposed to it, I'm just going to add this to our list of recommendations and then read out all of the recommendations. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to read these out. It'll be written out much nicer and more formally to the peer review committee, but the point right now is to make sure we're all on the same page with these recommendations. The current recommendations I have are a $5 decrease as opposed to an $8.50 decrease for the unions. A recommendation for the peer review committee to reconsider the entities that have been fully cut and consider splitting the amount of money to keep a flat fee between these entities. Formally, what that would look like is we would have a motion to reconsider. Motion to reconsider is separate. We would just have a motion to discuss each group that had been fully cut, is what we would do. And we would re-enter discussion, have discussion, vote on it again. Then we have Safe Ride to increase by $10.55 as opposed to $12.55. And we also have reducing the CAPS allocation to an increase of $3 as opposed to $4 and increasing student support and case management by $1. Does that all check out with every single recommendation that we've all agreed to by the most show of hands? That does? Okay. Mia's, or have you seen anything?
For everybody, I think it's important to note that I believe that the fee committee is not bound to following these recommendations. They're sort of a framework to guide discussion, so I just want that to be clear.
Absolutely. So, and I want to make this really clear because it seemed like we have just a little bit extra time here above the fixed adjournment. I think a big reason we're here today is because the first time the fee package was remanded by the Finance Council last year, adequate discussion was not had. Not all of the concerns were heard out before we were forced to adjourn at 10 p.m. I just really want to give a chance for the floor for anybody who has point information or anything else regarding additional recommendations for the fee review committee. So I'm seeing Ivana, anyone else? Just to get a show of hands. Okay. We'll go to Ivana and then we'll take this to a vote.
I have a recommendation to the committee to seek compromise in disagreements between members of the body and to make sure that all groups are seen equally and that equity is placed at the forefront of all decisions. I can send that to you in a Teams note too.
Sure, if you want the exact phrasing, I currently have it as a recommendation for the peer review committee to seek compromise and disagreements between members of the body, that all groups are heard equally, and equity is placed at the forefront of all decisions. Is that accurately reflect what you said? Okay, with that being said, I'll do it similarly to how we did with CAPS. So anybody who's opposed to adding another recommendation? I am seeing nobody who's opposed to adding another recommendation. Great. One last chance, anyone else who would like to add any more recommendations? Because we've got yeah.
Just an additional clause on that last recommendation, that all these equal deliberations happen in an open space for all members and all entities to be made aware of the intentions of members, i.e. not offline, or not online or outside of deliberation chambers. And phrase that much better in hearing.
Okay, so I have
Transparency.
previously said, and I'm adding on to it, in an open space for all members and trustees to be made aware of the proceedings.
Okay.
Okay? Anybody who's opposed to that addition? I'm not seeing anybody opposed. This is the last call for anything. Okay, great. So, can we adopt these by announcements? We should.
Yes.
Is there anybody who's opposed to the recommendations as have been read?
Let's vote on it.
Okay, let's vote on it really quick. It'll be a minute, 30-second poll. Just rename the poll something like fee review recommendation. Because we all know what we're talking about. It's also on recording. I sincerely hope it's picking up well. We've got them written down though. Also, for posterity, get a motion to vote and then a second.
Motion to vote.
Motion to vote by Sam, second from Henry. Seeing no objection to go vote. The poll's posted. The poll's posted, then 30 seconds to vote. No discussion on the vote. Around 30 seconds left to vote. Poll closes in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The poll is closed with 14 votes in affirmation. These recommendations pass. Okay, I'm going to skip announcements for now. I will hand everyone's announcements the mic as we all pack up and walk out of the room. I'll leave for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Jeff Brooker and then Alex Reed seconds it. We are out of here. Thank you. Any announcements?
Okay, I have a quick announcement. You guys can all walk out, totally fine. I'm doing a Narcan workshop to educate people on how to save lives. I think it's really important. So if you guys have time on March 28th, there will be free food and a free t-shirt, but there's going to be a workshop on what Narcan is, fentanyl test strips. You will get a free certificate as well. I think it's really important. And there will also be a pharmacy student panel, and Fisher and Jeff Berger will also be in it. So this will be held in the School of Engineering. Yes. It'll be March 28th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Free food, free t-shirt. Emphasis on the free.
1 minute, bro.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.